Greetings, Loremasters. Tonight, our chronicle covers the whispers and roars that tear the sky asunder, the ancient words of power that turn mortals into gods and mountains into dust. We are stepping away from the loud, concussive blasts you know so well to explore the subtle, terrifying, and often overlooked verses of the Thu'um. We are walking the path of the voice, but not the one the greybeards necessarily advertise to tourists. The air in Skyrim is thin, cold, and smells of pine resin and old blood. It is a land where the silence is just as heavy as the noise of battle. Tonight, we are going to dissect the shouts that sit gathering dust in your magic menu, the ones you ignore because they don't send bandits flying off cliffs with ragdoll physics. Let's be honest, most of you have shouted a goat off a cliff just to see it tumble, only to realise you forgot to save your game 3 hours ago, and now have to replay the entire Thalmor Embassy mission. It happens to the best of us. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the moons Massa and Secunda rise over the pixelated horizon, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the realm. I always love seeing the roll call of the Night Watch. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Dragonborn stands upon the precipice of the throat of the world, the highest point in Tamriel, where the snow never melts, and the wind speaks with the voices of ancient tongues. Far below, the world of men and Mer is nothing but a smudge of grey and green, a map spread out upon a table. It is here that we begin, not with a roar that shakes the earth, but with a whisper that leaves it behind entirely. Most adventurers, fresh from slaying their first dragon at the Western Watchtower, become intoxicated with the raw power of Unrelenting Force. It is the hammer in the toolbox, the blunt instrument that solves every problem by pushing it away. But the true masters of the voice, those who have studied the word walls hidden in the deepest barrows and highest peaks, know that true power often lies in negation. They know the words theme, z, gron, fade, spirit, bind. The shout is known as Become Ethereal, and it is perhaps the most philosophically terrifying ability in the Dovahkiin's arsenal. To speak these words is to reject the physical reality of Nirn. When the Dragonborn utters Faim, the first syllable, the body does not brace for impact, it relaxes. The flesh loses its opacity, shifting into a spectral, translucent blue that shimmers like moonlight on a frozen lake. The heartbeat slows to a phantom rhythm. The steel plate armour, the heavy ebony shield, the Daedric great sword, all of it loses its mass, becoming nothing more than a memory of the weight. In this state, the Dragonborn is untouchable. Imagine the sensation. You're in the heat of combat, surrounded by the Draugr Deathlords of Forelhost. The air is thick with the smell of embalming fluids and rot. Ancient Nord greatswords, honed to a razor edge despite thousands of years of neglect, are swinging in deadly arcs. A normal warrior blocks, a normal warrior dodges, a normal warrior bleeds. But the Dragonborn speaks Faim Z Gron, and suddenly the world is distant. The rusted blade of a Deathlord passes straight through the Dragonborn's chest, meeting no resistance, severing no muscle, breaking no bone. It is as if the warrior has become a ghost haunting their own life. There is a profound stillness inside the shout. The cacophony of battle becomes muffled like shouting underwater, while in this state the Dragonborn cannot be harmed by fire, frost, shock or steel. They are effectively removed from the timeline of pain. However, this pact with the void comes with a price, a balance, as all things in the Orbis must have. While you are a ghost, you cannot strike. To swing your sword, to loose an arrow, or to cast a spell is to break the concentration, to solidify the spirit back into flesh instantly. It is a defensive trance, a moment of absolute safety in the centre of a chaotic storm. One of the most legendary applications of this shout, a trick passed down through whispers in the dark corners of taverns from Solitude to Riften, involves the negation of gravity itself. It is a core fact of the Dragonborn's existence. Gravity is the one enemy you cannot kill with a sword. But Become Ethereal changes the rules. Picture the Dragonborn standing at the very edge of High Hrothgar's courtyard. The drop is fatal. Thousands of feet of jagged rock and icy sheer cliffs. To fall is to die. But with the words spoken, the Dragonborn steps off the ledge. the stomach-dropping sensation of freefall kicks in, the wind rushing past the ears with the roar of a jet engine, the ground rushing up to meet them with terrifying speed. A normal body would shatter upon impact, a gruesome end to a glorious hero. But the ethereal form has no mass to shatter. The Dragonborn hits the ground not with a crunch, but with a silent, soft landing, like a feather settling on the snow. They tumble, perhaps, but they do not break. The shout allows for the traversal of Skyrim's verticality in ways that defy the laws of physics, turning lethal descents into mere shortcuts. Yet, finding the words requires a journey into the dark. One of the word walls for this shout lies deep within the bowels of Ironbind Barrow. It is a place of tragedy, where the warlord Gathric lies in wait. To learn the word Fime, the adventurer must trek through the frozen wastes, often accompanied by the treacherous Argonian Beamjar, a mage who seeks to harness the power of the Barrow for himself. It is a subtle reminder from the developers. The path to becoming a spirit is often paved with the betrayal of the living. There is an obscure piece of lore attached to this shout, one that many seasoned travellers overlook in their rush to complete quest markers. If the Dragonborn meditates on the word Fime with Parthenax, the old dragon atop the throat of the world, he grants an ability known as Eternal Spirit. This isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it is a deepening of the Dragonborn's understanding of the concept of fading. Parthenax teaches that true strength comes from inner stillness. With this understanding, the Dragonborn actually regenerates health at an accelerated rate while ethereal. It transforms the shout from a simple dodge mechanic into a regenerative cocoon. You aren't just hiding from the world, you're using the void to knit your flesh back together, fueled by the very absence of reality. It implies that the natural state of the dragon soul is one of wholeness, and only by shedding the mortal shell can it repair itself fully. The community has long debated the metaphysics of Become Ethereal. Some fans argue that the shout actually transports the Dragonborn to a pocket realm of oblivion for those few seconds, a personal plane of existence where nothing else exists. Others, the more lore-heavy scholars who spend their nights reading the 36 lessons of Vivek, suggest that the shout is a minor form of tonal architecture manipulation, essentially telling the universe, "I am not here," so convincingly that the universe agrees. It's a form of reality warping that borders on the divine. If the Dragonborn says they are a spirit, then for the dreamhead of the godhead, they are a spirit. The debate rages on in the forums, often sandwiched between arguments about whether the Stormcloaks are racists or freedom fighters. But the terrifying implication remains. The voice can rewrite the fundamental laws of existence, if only for a few seconds. Tactically, the shout is often ignored because it lacks the visceral feedback of fire or lightning. It doesn't feel powerful to turn blue and run away. But consider the stamina management. In the heat of a fight against a legendary dragon, when your lungs are burning and your stamina bar is flashing empty, you cannot sprint, you cannot power bash, you are a sitting duck. Become Ethereal allows you to stand directly in the stream of dragonfire, letting your stamina recharge while the flames wash over you harmlessly. It is the ultimate patience game. You're telling the dragon, "Burn all you want, I am not currently available to be incinerated." The visual storytelling of the shout also deserves a mention. When the effect ends, there is a distinct sound, a sharp, shattering noise like ice cracking or a glass seal breaking. It signifies the violent return to mortality. The colours of the world snap back from the ghostly blue filter to the harsh greys and browns of Skyrim. It is a jarring transition, a reminder that the safety of the spirit world is temporary. You must eventually return to the mud and the blood. Think of the synergy with other dark arts. A master of the arcane might cast a master-level destruction spell, which takes 3 seconds of vulnerable wind-up time, an eternity in combat. By shouting, "Become ethereal" first, the mage can channel the apocalypse in peace, immune to the arrows and sword strikes trying to interrupt them, only to unleash the spell the moment the shout fades. It creates a rhythm of invulnerability and devastation that is almost unfair to the bandits on the receiving end. They swing at a ghost only to be incinerated by a god a second later. But beyond the mechanics, there is a haunting beauty to the shout. It is the Dragonborn acknowledging that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to simply cease to exist in the eyes of the enemy. In a world obsessed with armor ratings and damage per second, Become Ethereal offers a different path: transcendence. It is the no you of the shout world, a cosmic rejection of consequences. As the Dragonborn walks through the trap-filled corridors of Ustengrav, the tomb of Jürgen Windcaller, to learn the second word Z, they are following in the footsteps of a man who realised that the voice should be used for worship, not war. Perhaps Become Ethereal is the truest expression of the way of the voice. It is purely defensive, it cannot kill, it can only preserve. It is the pacifist's prayer in a land of warmongers, allowing the traveller to walk through a bear trap without triggering it, or to swim through freezing, slaughter, fish-infested waters without drowning, as the shout also conserves oxygen. Yes, you heard that right. While ethereal, you do not need to breathe. The biological necessity of oxygen is suspended because spirits do not breathe. This opens up the abyssal depths of the Sea of Ghosts for exploration, allowing the Dragonborn to sink to the bottom of the ocean like a stone, walking along the seabed while searching for shipwrecks and sunken chests, protected from the crushing pressure and the suffocating lack of air. It turns the Dragonborn into a creature of the deep, an amphibious entity that belongs neither to the land nor the sea, but to the magic that binds them. So the next time you find yourself staring down the gullet of an ancient dragon, or surrounded by a bandit chief and his marauders, resist the urge to blow them away with unrelenting force. Instead, whisper Fime. Let their swords pass through you like smoke. Watch their confusion as you stand there, a spectral avenger, letting your magicka and stamina return, waiting for the perfect moment to solidify and strike. It is a slower way to fight, a more methodical dance, but it is one that leaves you feeling like a master of reality rather than just a brute with a loud voice. The ethereal form fades, the colours return, the cold wind of the throat of the world bites at exposed skin once more. The Dragonborn is solid again, heavy with the weight of destiny and loot, but for a moment, they were nothing. And sometimes being nothing is the most powerful thing you can be. From that place of absolute nothingness, the Dragonborn returns to the solid world, but the air has shifted. If Become Ethereal is the shield of the pacifist, then the next shout in our repertoire is the serrated dagger of the executioner. We move from the defensive arts to a shout so malicious, so inherently cruel, that it feels less like a heroic bellow and more like a curse spat from the lips of a necromancer. We are talking about marked for death. Most shouts in Skyrim are kinetic. They push, they pull, they burn. They operate on the physical world in a way that makes sense to the eyes, but marked for death operates on the very vitality of the victim. The words are Kree, Lun, Aus, kill, leech, suffer. Even the translation sounds like a threat you'd find scrawled on the wall of an asylum. When the Dragonborn unleashes this voice, there is no explosion. There is no thunderclap. Instead, a sickly purple-grey haze washes over the target, accompanied by a sound that resembles a sharp intake of breath or the tearing of old parchment. Imagine a bandit chief, clad in superior Nordic carved armour, standing confident behind a heavy shield. He's a fortress of steel and fur ready to tank 1,000 arrows. You shout Kree Lunaus. He doesn't stumble, he doesn't fall. For a moment he might even laugh, thinking you missed. But then, the math of the universe begins to turn against him. This shout is the ultimate armour crusher. In the cold mechanics of the game, it drains health per second, which is useful. But the true horror, and the reason it is hidden in the ignored pile by casual players, is its secondary effect. It drains armour rating, and it does so aggressively. With all 3 words spoken, it reduces the enemy's armour rating by 75 points per second for 60 seconds. Do the math. That is a reduction of 4,500 armour points over the duration. Considering most enemies don't even have that much armour to begin with, the shout pushes their defense value into the negatives. When an enemy's armour rating goes negative, the damage calculation flips. Instead of mitigating damage, they actually take amplified damage. A simple swing of an iron dagger, which usually scratches against plate mail like a toothpick, suddenly hits with the force of a collapsing building. You're essentially stripping the enemy naked and then turning their skin into wet paper, all while they are still wearing their full gear. It creates a dissonance between what you see, a heavily armoured tank, and what happens, a warrior who collapses from a stiff breeze. There is a disturbing intimacy to using this shout. You aren't overpowering your opponent, you are degrading them. The lore implication here is that the Thu'um is commanding the target's timeline to accelerate towards decay. You're speaking the concept of mortality directly into their bones. The steel of their cuirass rusts instantly at a microscopic level. The leather straps dry rot and snap. Their muscles atrophy in real time. It is the weaponization of entropy. Finding the words requires you to walk paths that are often soaked in blood. One of the word walls resides in the Falkreath Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary. This is a core in-game fact that forces a moral choice, or at least a role-playing commitment. To learn this word, you're generally rubbing shoulders with assassins, vampires and psychopaths. It sits there in the sanctuary, bathed in the gloom of that underground cavern, a favourite meditation spot for the likes of Babette and Cicero. It feels appropriate that the shout for "Kill, Leech, Suffer" is housed in the headquarters of the guild that worships death incarnate. It suggests that the Dark Brotherhood understands the voice not as a holy gift from Kinnereth, but as just another tool for the contract, another way to send a soul to the void. However, there is a dark humour to the shout's mechanics that the community has debated for years. In the original release of the game, and lingering in various patches, the armour reduction effect was permanent. It didn't wear off when the combat ended. This led to some truly tragic and hilarious accidental moments for companion users. Let's say you're fighting a Draugr Scourge and you accidentally clip your loyal housecarl Lydia with the edge of the shout. She survives the fight, she eats some bread, and she seems fine, but her armour rating is now permanently destroyed. For the rest of the game, until you use console commands to fix it, Lydia is effectively made of glass. A mud crab could pinch her toe, and she would fold like a lawn chair. This bug has become a sort of grim piece of fan lore. The idea that the Dragonborn's curse is so potent that not even the divine intervention of reloading a save can fully wash away the stain of Kree Lun Aus. Tactically, this shout is the solution to the damage sponge problem. We've all fought them, ancient dragons on legendary difficulty that have health bars longer than a Skyrim winter. Hacking away at them feels like trying to chop down a tree with a spoon. But apply Marked for Death, wait 30 seconds and dodge their attacks. Then strike. The health bar melts, it evaporates. The shout effectively removes the difficulty curve of high-level enemies by bypassing their statistical advantages. It levels the playing field by dragging the demigods down to the mud. There is also an obscure bit of mechanical interaction involving the stacking of the shout. If you have gear that reduces shout cooldowns, like the Amulet of Talos combined with the Blessing of Talos, you can apply a second stack of Marked for Death before the first one wears off. The effects compound. The armour rating plummets into the negative thousands. At this point, you are dealing damage numbers that the game engine struggles to comprehend. It is possible to one-shot the Ebony Warrior with a wooden sword if you have cursed him enough times. It's a distinct kind of power fantasy, not of strength, but of debility. You are the Plague Bringer. Visually, the shout is underwhelming, which is perhaps why it is ignored. We are simple creatures. We like fireballs and lightning bolts. A grey haze isn't exactly cinematic, but if you listen closely to the sound design, there is a whispering quality to the audio, a layering of voices that sounds like the moans of the dying. It's subtle, creepy, and perfectly fits the theme of the shout. It's the sound of life leaving a vessel. The fan community has long theorised about the nature of the leech, Lun aspect of the shout. In-game, the health drain is minor, almost negligible compared to the armour ruin. But lore-wise, some argue that the Dragonborn is actually absorbing that vitality, or feeding it to the land. There is a debate on whether Marked for Death is a corruption of a restoration shout, a healing song played backwards. If restoration is the magic of knitting together, Marked for Death is the magic of unravelling. It is the antithesis of the restoration school, proof that the voice can be as vile as it is holy. Consider the roleplay implications. A paladin-type Dragonborn, a servant of Meridia or Stendar, would likely never let these words cross their lips. It is a dirty way to fight. It lacks honour. There is no glory in fighting an opponent whose armour has crumbled to dust and whose strength has been sapped by a magical disease. But for a thief, an assassin, or a vampire lord, it is the bread and butter. It is the unfair advantage that defines their existence. The shout also highlights a terrifying reality of the Dragonborn's power, the ability to define the condition of others. When you use Unrelenting Force, you change the enemy's location. When you use Marked for Death, you change the enemy's state. You're rewriting their physical attributes. You're telling the universe, this creature is weak, and the universe complies. It is a form of reality bending that is far more insidious than simply shouting fire. Walking away from a fight where Marked for Death was used feels different. The bodies aren't just dead. They look used up, discarded. The armour on the corpses should, by all rights, be rusted scrap metal. It's a shout that leaves a bad taste in the mouth, a metallic tang of cruelty. But when you are deep in a farmer hive, surrounded by Chorus Reapers and blind, hate-filled elves, honour is a luxury you cannot afford. In the dark, with the chittering of insects all around, Kree is the best friend you have. It ensures that when you hit, you don't have to hit twice. And so, the Dragonborn stands over the withered husk of what was once a mighty adversary, the grey mist dissipating into the cold air. The weapon is sheathed, but the echo of the curse lingers in the stones of the dungeon. The armour was crushed not by a mace, but by a word. It is a chilling reminder that in Skyrim, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names, specifically 3 ancient draconic names, can absolutely kill you. As the echo of the curse fades, the Dragonborn looks inward, preparing to manipulate not the enemy, but the flow of time itself. The air grows heavy, the dust motes in the shaft of sunlight begin to drag, and the heartbeat of the world starts to skip a beat. We leave the decay behind and step into the stillness of the hourglass. From the decay of the flesh, we move to the stillness of the moment. If Marked for Death is the weapon of the executioner, then slow time is the tool of the artist. It is the brushstroke of the master swordsman who sees the battle not as chaotic scramble, but as a series of deliberate frozen frames. We're talking about the words Tid, Klo, Ul, time, sand, eternity. To the uninitiated, time in Skyrim is a constant. The sun rises, the moon set, and the courier always manages to find you at the most inconvenient moment. But for the Dragonborn who has mastered slow time, the clock is merely a suggestion. This shout is often ignored because it feels defensive or passive to new players who just want to blast things. But ask any high-level player who plays on legendary difficulty, and they will tell you, slow time is the god mode switch. When the words leave your lips, Tid Klo Ul, the world undergoes a radical shift. The soundscape warps, stretching out into a deep guttural groan. The ambient music drops an octave, becoming a slow, haunting drone. The visual feedback is subtle but profound. The edges of the screen blur and the colours desaturate slightly, as if the world is losing its vibrancy because it cannot keep up with you. In this dilated reality, everything slows to a crawl. An arrow fired by a bandit doesn't zip past your ear. It drifts through the air like a fish swimming in molasses. You can watch the fletching spin. You can step sideways, casually, and watch the death-dealing projectile pass harmlessly through the space you occupied a heartbeat ago. The bandit who fired it is frozen in the follow-through of his draw, his face contorted in a scream of exertion that hasn't even reached your ears yet. But here is the kicker, the detail that makes this shout terrifyingly powerful. You're not slowed down as much as they are. You move faster, relatively speaking. While the Draugr Deathlord is winding up his overhead swing, a motion that takes him 3 agonising seconds in this time-dilated state. You have already circled behind him, drank a potion, applied a poison to your blade, and struck him 3 times in the back. By the time time resumes its normal flow, the Draugr is dead before he even realised he was under attack. It is the anime swordsman fantasy brought to life. Finding the words for this shout takes you to some of the most iconic locations in the game. One word rests in Labyrinthian, a place steeped in the tragic history of the College of Winterhold. It's where Savos Aran left his friends to die to keep the dragon priest Moroke contained. To learn slow time here is to understand the cost of time, the years lost, the friends forgotten. Another word is hidden in Corvan Jund, the resting place of the Jagged Crown. Whether you're storming it with the Imperials or the Stormcloaks, you're fighting over a symbol of the past, making the time-bending shout a fitting reward. There is a fascinating, obscure lore tidbit related to the shout's cooldown. A fully upgraded slow time shout slows time to 10% of its normal speed for 16 seconds. However, if the Dragonborn has the stability perk from the alteration tree and drinks a potion of Fortify alteration, the duration extends significantly. Why? Because in the Elder Scrolls universe, time is not just a physical constant, it is a magical construct governed by the dragon god Akatosh. Alteration magic deals with manipulating the physical laws of the world. Therefore, the game logic treats time as just another physical law to be bent by alteration. It's a brilliant synergy that suggests the Thu'um and arcane magic are tapping into the same source code of reality. The community has long debated the actual mechanics of what is happening here. Is the Dragonborn moving supernaturally fast, super speed, or is the rest of the world truly slowing down? The shout creates a localized dragon break, a phenomenon in Elder Scrolls lore where the linear timeline shatters. Fans theorize that by shouting Teed, the Dragonborn is asserting their dominance as a shard of Akatosh, the Time Dragon. They are essentially pulling rank on the universe, commanding the flow of time to obey their whim. It's not just speed, it's authority. Let's talk about the specific tactical utility that often goes unnoticed. Slow time is the ultimate answer to mages. There is nothing more frustrating than an ice spike slowing you down or a fireball staggering you. But with time slowed, you can literally run between the spells. You can close the gap on a mage who is halfway through casting a ward and interrupt them with a shield bash before their hands can even glow. It turns the frantic bullet hell of a mage fight into a tactical puzzle that you have already solved. Furthermore, slow time interacts beautifully with the archery skill Steady Hand, which also slows time while zooming in. When you stack the shout with the perk, the world practically stops. Arrows hang in the air like floating decorations. You can fire 3 arrows at 3 different targets before the first one hits its mark. It allows for feats of marksmanship that would make Legolas blush. You become a turret of death, dispensing judgment with surgical precision. But there is a haunting quality to the shout as well. Consider the audio design again. When the shout ends, the world catches up. The sound rushes back in a whoosh of noise, the clash of steel, the screams of the dying, the roar of the wind. It's a sensory overload that emphasizes just how quiet the slowed world was. It implies that the Dragonborn exists in a lonely place when using this power, a solitary figure moving through a statuesque world. There is also a well-known exploit, or perhaps a feature, involving the duration. If you use slow time and then activate an object like a door or a crafting table, the effect sometimes persists or glitches out, leaving the world in a semi-permanent state of lethargy. While obviously a bug, loreheads like to imagine this is the danger of messing with Akatosh's domain. Stretch time too thin, and it might not snap back correctly. You might leave a part of the world lagging behind, a temporal scar on the face of Skyrim. Think about the sheer audacity of this power in a role-playing context. A thief character using slow time can pick a pocket, steal the key, unlock the chest, and leave the room while the guard is mid-yawn. It's not just for combat, it's for anything that requires precision. Trying to catch a butterfly or a dartwing. Slow time. Trying to grab a specific item from a table without knocking over the sweet roll. Slow time. It is the ultimate tool for the perfectionist. One of the most satisfying uses, however, involves the arrow catching trick. With the deflect arrows perk in the block tree, you can block arrows with your shield. But with slow time, you can perform a manual deflect. You can wait for the arrow to approach, then casually raise your shield at the very last millisecond to bat it away. It's a flex. It's showing the enemy that their fastest attack is, to you, painfully slow. It demoralizes the AI, if the AI had feelings, by demonstrating total superiority. We must also touch on the visuals of the shout cooldown bar while this is active. Because the shout lasts a decent amount of time, your cooldown is actually recharging while the shout is still active, depending on your build and patches. This means that with enough cooldown reduction gear, shout out to the Amulet of Talos again, you can chain slow time shouts almost back to back. You can live your entire life in the spaces between seconds. You become a creature of the in-between, a wraith that only interacts with the world on its own terms. The third word, ul, eternity, is a heavy concept. The Nords believe that Alduin needs time itself to end the world. By using slow time, the Dragonborn is taking a small bite of that power, tasting the eternity that belongs to the dragons. It is a reminder that the line between the hero and the villain is often just a matter of perspective. You're using the same tools as the World Eater, just on a smaller scale. As the shout fades and the world snaps back to its chaotic, fast-paced reality, the Dragonborn is left standing amidst a scene that has changed in the blink of an eye. Enemies are dead, traps are disarmed, and loot is collected. To the observer, perhaps a terrified follower or a confused guard, the Dragonborn moved like a blur, a whirlwind of steel. But to the Dragonborn, it was a leisurely stroll through a frozen gallery of violence. The mastery of time sets the stage for the mastery of the elements themselves. If slow time is about control, our next shout is about surrendering to the chaotic speed of the wind itself. We are moving from the calculated strike to the frenzied barrage. Prepare to swing your blades faster than the eye can follow, for the winds of Kine are at our back. We step from the frozen gallery of slow time, where every motion is a deliberate masterpiece, into the screaming gale of elemental fury. If the previous shout was the calculated strike of a grandmaster, this one is the berserker's prayer, a frantic, blurring ode to violence that turns the Dragonborn's arms into piston-driven engines of destruction. We are talking about the words Su, Gra, Dun, Air, Battle, Grace. The translation is deceptive. Grace implies elegance, a ballroom dance, but elemental fury is the grace of a buzzsaw. It is the elegance of a tornado tearing through a trailer park. This shout is criminally ignored by the enchanted weapon crowd, the folks addicted to their fiery soul-trap maces. Why? Because elemental fury refuses to work on enchanted weapons. It demands pure, unadulterated steel, or ebony or dragonbone. It demands a weapon that has no magic of its own, so that the voice can fill the void. When you scream Sugradun, the wind itself wraps around your limbs. The sound is a high-pitched whistling, like a gale forcing its way through a narrow canyon. Your arms feel weightless. That heavy, two-handed warhammer of Volendrung proportions, it suddenly feels like a willow switch. That pair of Daedric daggers, they become extensions of your nervous system. The effect is a raw attack speed increase. With all three words, your swing speed doubles. That might not sound like much on paper, 100% increase, but in the game engine it is catastrophic. You become a blur. You're swinging a greatsword faster than a standard bandit can swing a dagger. You're landing 3 hits for every one of theirs. The sheer DPS, damage per second, output of a dual-wielding warrior with elemental fury is arguably the highest sustained physical damage in the game, outstripping even the most potent chaotic enchantment builds. This shout makes unenchanted builds not just viable, but terrifyingly optimal. It is the shout for the smithing purist, the warrior who spends hours at the grindstone tempering their blade to legendary quality, but refuses to sully the metal with a soul gem. It validates the craftsmanship of the weapon itself. You don't need fire damage when you're hitting the enemy 6 times in 2 seconds with a piece of sharpened dragon bone. The physical trauma alone is enough to turn a giant into paste. Finding the word sends you on a pilgrimage to some of Skyrim's most open and windy locales. One word is at Dragontooth Crater, deep in the Reach, guarded by a dragon that loves to use fire breath. It's a fitting place. You must defeat the elemental fire to claim the elemental wind. Another lies at the statue to Meridia, near Kilcreath Ruins. Before you get dragged into a beacon quest, a new hand touches the beacon. You can learn the word Su. It's a nice little bonus for enduring the loudest deity in the game. Here is a core in-game fact that changes everything. Elemental Fury works on pickaxes. Yes, you heard. Me. If you equip a pickaxe as a weapon and shout, you can mine ore veins at hyperspeed. Instead of the slow, clinking animation, you just dual-wield power attack the ore vein, and bang bang bang, the ore is yours in a split second. It is the ultimate quality of life hack for the mining enthusiast. You can strip an entire mine in the time it takes to walk through it. It's not heroic, perhaps, but time is money, and Elemental Fury makes you the fastest miner in Tamriel, but back to combat. The obscure lore tidbit for this shout involves its interaction with the Necromancer perk, if you are a vampire. Because the shout is technically a magic effect applied to the player. Being a vampire with the Necromancer perk increases the shout's potency and duration. You swing even faster. At this point, the animations begin to break. Your character's arms are moving so fast the game can barely render the frames. You look like a glitch in the Matrix. It's a testament to how the game systems layer on top of each other to create unintended godhood. There is a fan theory that Elemental Fury is actually a form of windwalking, similar to what the Redguards call the Shi-Hai, or Spirit Sword, but applied to the body instead of a manifest blade. The words air, battle, grace suggest that you are letting the wind fight through you. You're not swinging the sword, The wind is swinging you. You're merely the anchor for a localized hurricane. It paints the Dragonborn as a vessel for Kain's wrath, a conduit for the storm. Tactically, this shout solves the slow, two-handed problem. Two-handed weapons have huge stagger potential but leave you open. With Elemental Fury, you remove the opening. You can stun-lock enemies indefinitely. A bandit blocks your first hit. Your second hit breaks his block. Your third hit staggers him. Your fourth, fifth, and sixth hits kill him before he recovers from the stagger. It turns the slow, rhythmic dance of two-handed combat into a relentless beatdown. And let's talk about the sound. The thwack, thwack, thwack of impacts becomes a drum roll. There is a visceral satisfaction to the audio feedback. You feel like a woodchipper. Against unarmoured targets like bears or saber cats, it is almost cruel. They don't even get a chance to initiate their attack animation. They are dead before they know they are in a fight. However, the shout has a trap. It creates a dependency on non-enchanted gear. This means you miss out on paralysis, health absorption, or soul trap enchantments. It forces a pure physical playstyle. You have to rely on potions and food for healing, rather than your weapon. It strips the crutches away and leaves only the steel and the shout. It's a purist's shout, demanding a build dedicated to it. Visually, the shout adds a subtle white wind trail to your weapon swings. It looks like the air is cutting along with the blade. In third-person mode, it looks spectacular. A whirlwind of steel surrounding the character. It is the closest Skyrim gets to the visual style of a hack-and-slash game like Devil May Cry. There is a distinct joy in using this against the Thalmor. The High Elves pride themselves on their magical superiority, their wards, and their enchanted gilded armour. To rush them with a plain steel sword moving faster than they can cast is a poetic rebuttal to their philosophy. It says, "My arm is faster than your magic." It is the triumph of the physical over the arcane. Let's not forget the synergy with the Longhammer, a unique orcish warhammer found in Liar's Retreat. The Longhammer has a unique innate effect, not an enchantment, that makes it swing faster than a normal warhammer. Because it's not an enchantment in the coding sense, Elemental Fury works on it. The result is a two-handed hammer that swings as fast as a dagger. The DPS is astronomical. You're hitting for heavy weapon damage at light weapon speeds. It is arguably the highest melee DPS setup in the entire game, capable of melting Alduin in seconds on the highest difficulty. It is the delete button of melee combat. As the wind dies down and your arms finally stop vibrating from the speed, you're left with a pile of enemies who look like they were put through a blender. Elemental Fury is not about control, nor is it about magic. It is about the raw, kinetic joy of speed. It is about hitting things until they stop moving, and doing it faster than anyone else. But sometimes, speed isn't enough. Sometimes the crowd is too thick, the enemies too numerous. Sometimes, you don't need to be fast. You need them to be still. Not just slow, but solid. Frozen. We move from the chaotic wind to the biting cold. We leave the blur of the blade for the stillness of the glacier. The wind settles, the blur of the blade halts, and the Dragonborn stands amidst the carnage, chest heaving. Speed is a heady drug, but it is chaotic. It lacks structure. Sometimes the battlefield is too messy. Too many moving parts. A master of the voice knows that when the board is cluttered, the best move is to simply stop the pieces from moving entirely. We trade the frantic gale of Elemental Fury for the paralysing bite of ice form. The words are Ys, Slen, Nuss. Ice, flesh, statue. This shout is often dismissed by players as a worse Unrelenting Force. Why freeze them when you can just ragdoll them? But this comparison misses the point entirely. Unrelenting Force scatters enemies, often throwing them behind cover or down cliffs where you can't loot them. It creates chaos. Iceform creates order. It is the ultimate crowd control tool for the discerning tactician who prefers their enemies to stay exactly where they put them. When the Dragonborn speaks Ys Slennus, a wave of pure cryomancy erupts from their lips. It isn't a blast of snow, it is a wave of instant thermal entropy. The target doesn't just get cold, they flash freeze. Mid-stride, mid-scream, mid-swing, they are encased in a thick, translucent shell of magical ice. They topple over, stiff as a board, hitting the ground with a heavy, solid thud that sounds more like a falling tree than a falling man. The core in-game fact that makes this shout superior in specific situations is the duration. A fully upgraded ice form keeps an enemy frozen for a staggering amount of time. We're talking about taking a bandit chief or a reaver lord out of the fight completely while you deal with his minions. It turns a 1v5 into a series of 1v1s, and unlike paralysis spells, which have a chance to fail or be resisted by high-level enemies, the shout is remarkably consistent. If it hits, they freeze. But the real magic, the sadistic little detail that makes this shout a favourite for the cruel, is the damage over time. The ice isn't just a cage, it's a torture device. While frozen, the enemy takes frost damage every second. It's not a huge amount, but it adds up. It represents the utter sap of body heat, the blood turning to slush in their veins. You can freeze an enemy, sit down, eat a sweet roll, and watch their health bar slowly tick down to 0. It is the ultimate cool kill, pun intended. Finding the words for ice form takes you to some of the chilliest, most hostile places in Skyrim. One word is in Mount Anthor, a dragon lair often plagued by glitches where the dragon flies off to Winterhold to harass the college mages. Another is in Sarthal, the ancient Nord city where the Night of Tears occurred. You find it during the College of Winterhold questline right after fighting a Draugr boss. It feels fitting that in the ruins where elves and men first clashed over magical power, you learn the power to turn flesh into statues. There is an obscure lore tidbit found in the game, files and older texts regarding the nature of magical ice in the Elder Scrolls. It is often referred to as Stalrim in its solid mineral form, but the ice created by the voice is something more primal. It is condensed static time. Some metaphysical scholars in the community suggest that ice form is related to the concept of stasis. You aren't just lowering the temperature, you're halting the biological processes of the target so violently that they become an inanimate object. You're briefly turning a person into terrain. The tactical application shines in ledge control. Sure, Fus Ro Dah blows people off cliffs, but ice form turns them into a sled. If you freeze an enemy on a slope, they don't just fall, they slide. They pick up momentum. Watching a frozen Falmer accelerate down a spiral ramp in a Dwemer ruin, banking off the walls like a bobsled, is a specific brand of slapstick comedy that never gets old. And when they hit the bottom, they are still frozen, waiting for you to come down and finish the job. But there is a catch, a balance mechanic that you must respect. If you hit the frozen enemy, the ice breaks. They are free. This is why it requires discipline. You cannot just flail wildly. You must choose your moment to break the ice. The optimal strategy is to let them marinate in the cold, taking the damage over time, while you position yourself for a charged power attack. You stand over their frozen form, winding up your warhammer, and the moment the ice begins to crack, crunch. The shatter damage combined with a power attack is devastating. Let's talk about the psychological horror of this shout. Imagine being the bandit. You see the Dragonborn, you shout a war cry, then suddenly, darkness and cold. You are conscious perhaps, trapped in a prison of your own frozen fluids, unable to move, unable to blink, feeling your life ebb away. Then you hear the footsteps approaching. You see the shadow of the hammer looming over you through the distorted ice. You can do nothing. Ice form is the stuff of nightmares. There is a fan debate about whether ice form is actually a light version of the shout the Greybeards use to encase the Dragonborn in ice during the greeting ceremony if you attack them. The Greybeards can freeze you instantly and indefinitely. Ice form seems to be the combat-ready, weaponized version of that discipline. It suggests that the Greybeards know far more about crowd control than they let on. One of the best uses for this shout is against the smaller, annoying enemies that swarm you. Spiders, wolves, skeevers. Lining them up and freezing an entire pack turns a frantic, ankle-biting session into a sculpture garden. It allows you to walk past them with disdain. "Stay there," the shout implies. "I will deal with you when I am ready." The visual effect of the ice encasing the body is one of the better shader effects in the game. It catches the light, reflecting the torches or the dungeon gloom. It makes the enemy look like a prize trapped in amber, and the sound of the shout, "Is Slen Nos," is sharp, biting, whispered with a hiss that mimics the sound of flash-freezing nitrogen. Consider the roleplay of a Nord cryomancer, a warrior who worships the bitter cold of Skyrim as a cleansing force. This shout is their signature move. It is the embrace of the homeland. To freeze an invader, an Imperial soldier or a Thalmor agent, is to introduce them to the true nature of the North. Skyrim belongs to the Nords, you say, as you turn them into a block of Skyrim's own ice. There is also a fun interaction with water. If you freeze an enemy standing in shallow water, they don't float, they sink. If the water is deep enough, they can drown while frozen. It's a grim way to go, but efficient. It adds an environmental hazard layer to the shout that rewards situational awareness. As the ice thaws and the shattered remnants of your enemies melt into puddles on the dungeon floor, the chill in the air lingers. You have mastered the cold, the stillness, the solid state of water. But nature is not just ice. Nature is also energy. It is chaos. It is the roar from the heavens that cannot be blocked, dodged, or frozen. We look up from the frozen ground to the storm clouds gathering above. The air grows thick with ozone. The hair on your arm stands up. We're about to unleash the most indiscriminate, uncontrollable, and visually spectacular shout in the Dragonborn's arsenal. We are summoning the lightning. The ice cracks, melts, and evaporates, but the air does not warm up. Instead, the pressure drops. The hair on your arms begins to stand on end, and a metallic taste fills your mouth. The taste of ozone and impending doom. We have explored the surgical precision of time dilation and the cruel control of freezing, but now we must discuss the shout that abandons all pretense of control. We're talking about the nuclear option. We're talking about Stormcall. The words are Strun, Bar, Q. Storm, Wrath, Lightning. If Iceform is a sniper rifle, Stormcall is an orbital bombardment. It is the shout you use when you don't care about collateral damage, when you don't care about loot, and when you absolutely, positively need every living thing in a 10-mile radius to suffer. This shout is often ignored by players not because it is weak, but because it is too strong. It is unwieldy. It is dangerous. It is the only shout in the game that is just as likely to kill your horse as it is to kill the dragon you are fighting. When the Dragonborn screams Strunba Ko at the heavens, the game engine itself seems to shudder. The skybox changes instantly. No matter where you are, the sunny plains of Whiterun, the foggy marshes of Morthal, dark rolling thunderheads materialize out of the ether. The light fades into a bruised purple twilight, and then the rain begins. Not a gentle shower, but a torrential downpour that obscures vision. And then comes the lightning. This is the core mechanic that defines the shout. For 180 seconds, 3 full minutes, bolts of lightning will strike random targets within the storm's radius. These aren't the weak sparks from a novice spark spell. These are heavy, staggering bolts of divine judgment that deal massive shock damage. The catch? The lightning has no allegiance. It targets threats, but its definition of a threat is incredibly loose. It strikes enemies. It strikes neutrals. It strikes your follower. It strikes the town guard who was just trying to help you. It strikes the poor chicken in the village square. This friendly fire chaos creates a specific kind of horror comedy unique to Skyrim. You might use it to clear a bandit camp, feeling like a god of thunder, only to realize halfway through that your loyal housecarl Lydia has been struck by 3 consecutive bolts and is currently crawling on the ground, begging for a healing potion. It forces a solitary playstyle. To use Stormcall responsibly, you must be alone. You must be the eye of the storm, the only safe point in a world gone mad. The cooldown of this shout is a significant in-game fact that dictates its usage. With all 3 words unlocked, the cooldown is a staggering 600 seconds, 10 minutes. In Skyrim time, that is an eternity. It is the longest cooldown of any shout in the base game. This means that Stormcall is a commitment. Once you shout it, you are effectively silencing yourself for the rest of the encounter, and likely the next 2 encounters as well. You cannot follow it up with a Fus Ro Dah or a Whirlwind Sprint. You have played your ace, and now you must live with the consequences. It turns the shout into a strategic ultimate ability, something you save for the boss fight, not something you spam on the road. Finding the words for this shout involves a journey into the history of the dragon cult, and this is where the lore gets dark. One of the words is found in Forelhost, the site of the dragon cult's last stand. The history of Forelhost is a tragedy of mass suicide and fanaticism, where the cultists poison themselves rather than surrender to the Nordic armies. To learn the word Strun, there is to tap into that legacy of spite. It is a shout born from the desire to take everyone down with you. Another word lies in Skuldafn, and this is a crucial detail for completionists. Skuldafn is the temple complex you visit at the very end of the main quest, the gateway to Sovngarde. You can only go there once. You cannot fast travel back. If you miss the word wall in Skuldafn, you can never learn the full shout without cheating. This rarity adds to its mystique. It is a forbidden technique, locked behind the point of no return. It suggests that this level of power, the power to command the weather itself, is something that belongs to the other world, to the realm of the gods, not to the mundus. The community has long debated the nature of this shout in relation to Ulduin. During the opening sequence in Helgen, and later in the final battle, Ulduin uses a shout that summons a meteor shower. Fans often compare Stormcall to this dragon storm. The prevailing theory is that Strunbar is the mortal approximation of Ulduin's apocalypse. We cannot summon meteors because we are not the World Eater, so we settle for lightning. We are mimicking the end of the world on a budget. It's a terrifying thought, that the Dragonborn is slowly learning to replicate the mechanics of the apocalypse. Tactically, Stormcall is the ultimate anti-dragon weapon, oddly enough. Dragons fly. They are hard to hit with swords, and arrows can be tricky, but the lightning from Stormcall comes from the sky. It has perfect accuracy. It tracks the dragon in the air. If you are fighting a legendary dragon that refuses to land, simply summon the storm. The lightning will swat the dragon out of the sky like a fly swatter hitting a moth. It turns the dragon's advantage, flight, into a liability, as they are now closer to the source of the thunder. But the most cinematic use of the shout is undoubtedly during the Civil War questline. Picture the Battle for Whiterun, or the Battle for Solitude. Dozens of soldiers are clashing in the streets. Barricades are burning. The frame rate is struggling. You step onto the battlefield and shout, "Strunbar!" The sky turns black. Lightning begins to rain down on Imperials and Stormcloaks alike. It is absolute chaos. It feels like the intervention of a deity, who has grown tired of the petty squabbles of mortals. You want a war? The shout seems to say. Here is a war. However, there is a glitch, or perhaps a feature, regarding the weather system. If you use clear skies, the shout you learn to traverse the throat of the world, it instantly cancels Stormcall. This creates a rock-paper-scissors dynamic with the environment. If you accidentally summon a storm in a town and need to stop the slaughter, before you rack up a 10,000 gold bounty, clear skies is your emergency brake. It's the only way to put the genie back in the bottle. Visually, the shout is stunning, especially with modern lighting mods or the special edition upgrades. The way the lightning illuminates the landscape in brief, harsh flashes creates a strobe light effect. Shadows lengthen and vanish in milliseconds. The rain slicks the armor, making it shine. It changes the mood of the game from a high fantasy adventure to a grim gothic horror. It makes Skyrim feel hostile, alien, and uncontrollable. There is also a subtle interaction with the Lightning Storm master-level destruction spell. While that spell requires you to stand still and channel a beam of energy like a chaotic garden hose, Stormcall is passive. You can shout it, and then continue to fight with your sword and shield. It allows you to become a battle mage in the truest sense, wielding steel while the magic rages around you automatically. You're a walking conductor for the storm, but we must return to the ignoring part of the title. Why do players ignore this? Because of the bounty system. If a stray bolt of lightning kills a civilian in a city, the guards instantly know it was you. There is no stealth Stormcall. You cannot hide the fact that you turned the sky purple. This makes it unusable in 90% of the settled areas of the game. It is a wilderness shout, a tool for the untamed lands. It reinforces the idea that the Dragonborn is a wild thing, a creature that does not fit neatly within the walls of civilization. The sound design deserves a special mention here. The initial thunderclap of Strunbar is deafening. It clips the audio channels intentionally to simulate the overwhelming noise of a nearby strike. And the lingering rumble, the low-frequency bass that permeates the headset for the next 3 minutes, creates a sense of pressure. It's stressful. It's meant to be. It's not a happy shout. It's the sound of the sky tearing open. One obscure detail involves the range. The lightning can strike enemies that you haven't even aggroed yet. It can strike slaughterfish in the water, mud crabs on the shore, or a bear hiding in a cave entrance nearby. After the storm clears, you will often find a trail of dead wildlife that you didn't even know was there. You leave a radius of death simply by existing. It brings up the question, At what point does the Dragonborn cease to be a hero and start to become a natural disaster? As the clouds finally break and the last rumble of thunder fades into the distance, the silence returns to Skyrim. The ground is scorched, the air is clean, and the bodies are piled high. The storm has passed, and you are the only thing left standing. But sometimes, death shouldn't be messy. Sometimes, you don't want to destroy the body, you want to use it. You want to repurpose the vessel. We move from the indiscriminate destruction of the storm to the cold, calculating utility of necromancy, but not the kind that requires a spell tome. We're talking about ripping a soul directly from the chest of your enemy and forcing their corpse to serve you. The thunder of the storm fades, the lightning ceases its indiscriminate bombardment, and the ozone smell is replaced by something far older and far more stagnant. We leave the wild, untamable rage of Kind's weather behind and descend into the cold, calculated transactions of the ideal masters. We are crossing the threshold from the elemental to the necromantic. If Stormcall is the shout of a disaster, Soultear is the shout of a predator who wastes nothing. The words are Re, Vaz, Zol, Soul, Tear, Zombie. This shout is a late-game acquisition, hidden deep within the Dawnguard DLC, which is perhaps why so many players ignore it. By the time you unlock it, you're usually already a god-slaying machine. But to overlook Soultear is to overlook the most efficient Swiss Army knife in the Dragonborn's arsenal. It is necromancy distilled into 3 syllables, a compact spell that does the work of 3 separate actions in the blink of an eye. Let's look at the mechanics, because they are terrifyingly efficient. When the Dragonborn shouts Re, Vaz, Zol, 3 things happen simultaneously. First, it deals a massive amount of damage, 300 points of raw damage. To put that in perspective, that is stronger than a point-blank blast from a fireball. It is roughly equivalent to being hit in the face by a giant's club. For many enemies, the shout alone is an instant kill. Second, it casts Soul Trap on the target for 2 seconds. Third, if the target dies while under this effect, which they usually do because of the 300 damage, they are instantly reanimated as a zombie to fight for you. You scream, they die, their soul is captured, and their body stands back up to serve you. It is the ultimate reduce, reuse, reanimate cycle. Finding this shout requires a specific and rather tragic friendship. Unlike other shouts carved into cold stone walls by ancient Nords, this shout is taught to you directly by Durnafir, the cursed undead dragon who guards the Soul Cairn. The Soul Cairn is a plane of oblivion filled with trapped souls, purple skies, and lightning rods that hum with the misery of the dead. Durnafir is bound there, a prisoner of the ideal masters. When you defeat him and prove your strength, your Canarin or Vanquisher status, he offers to teach you this shout as a sign of respect. This leads to a core in-game fact that makes the shout unique. You must summon Durnafir into Tamriel 3 separate times to learn the full shout. He teaches you 1 word per visit. It creates a ritualistic bond between the Dragonborn and this fallen dragon. You aren't just reading history, you are learning the trade secrets of a dragon who bargained his soul away for necromantic power. It's a mentorship that feels personal, unlike the silent, dusty word walls in Draugr crypts. The obscure lore tidbit here involves the metaphysical nature of the tear, Vaz. Standard soul trap spells merely place a binding on the victim so their soul is caught, upon death. Soul tear, however, implies violence against the animus itself. The lore suggests that the voice is literally ripping the soul out of the body, before the body has even fully realised it is dead. It is a forceful eviction. This aligns with the brutal nature of the Soul Cairn, where souls are currency. The shout isn't just magic, it's a robbery. You're mugging the enemy for their very essence. Tactically, Soul Tear solves the biggest problem of the Conjuration playstyle: time. Reanimating a corpse with a spell like Revenant or Dread Zombie requires you to look at a dead body, charge the spell with both hands, which takes precious seconds, and release it. During that time, you are vulnerable. With Soul Tear, the reanimation is the result of the attack. You don't have to stop fighting to find a new minion. You make a new minion by killing the old enemy. It keeps the momentum of battle flowing forward. There is a grim satisfaction to using this on a powerful enemy, like a Draugr Deathlord or a high-level vampire. They charge at you, full of malice. You shout, they collapse dead, and before their knees even hit the floor they are rising again, surrounded by that telltale purple glow, turning to attack their former allies. It causes chaos in the enemy ranks. The AI isn't programmed to feel fear, but if it were, seeing their leader instantly switch sides would surely induce a morale check. However, the community debate around this shout often centres on morality. Is the Dragonborn evil for using this? The soul cairn is depicted as a place of eternal suffering. When you soul trap someone, the general consensus, fueled by Serana's dialogue, is that you're sending that soul to the soul cairn to be food for the ideal masters. By using soul tear, is the Dragonborn acting as a direct agent of these malevolent entities? Some fans argue that standard soul trapping is bad enough, but soul tear is a direct transaction with the dark powers that taught it to Durnafir. You are using the weapon of the jailer. On a lighter note, let's talk about the courier utility. We've all been there. You are over-encumbered, carrying 50 dragon bones and 12 sets of Dwemer armour. You can't run. You're crawling to the nearest city. But if you soul tear a bandit or a wolf, you have a zombie follower. Dead thralls have infinite carrying capacity if you can access their inventory, which is tricky with shouts, but the mechanic stands, they carry their own gear. More importantly, having a zombie fight for you means you don't have to spend stamina swinging a weapon. You can waddle slowly toward the merchant while your undead pet clears the road. It's the lazy necromancer's dream. The visual effects of the shout are distinct. Unlike the blue wind of Unrelenting Force or the fire of Yol, Soul Tear has a sickly purplish-green hue, mimicking the colour palette of the soul cairn. It looks infected. It looks wrong. When it hits, there is a sound like tearing wet cloth, a visceral audio cue that sells the tearing part of the name. Consider the synergy with the Twin Souls perk in the Conjuration tree. While the shout summons a zombie, it counts toward your summon limit. If you have the perk, you can have a permanent Atronach or Dremora Lord active, and then use Soul Tear to instantly fill the second slot during combat. It allows you to adapt your army on the fly. I have a tank, the Dremora, now I need a meat shield. Shout. Now you have a meat shield. But there is a limitation that keeps it from being completely broken. The duration. The zombie raise by Soul Tear only lasts for 60 seconds. It is not a permanent thrall. After the minute is up, the body disintegrates into a pile of ash. This is significant. You cannot re-raise an ash pile. This means Soul Tear is a use it and lose it ability. You are burning the resource, the corpse, for a burst of power. It encourages a disposable mindset toward your enemies. They are not trophies to be kept, they are batteries to be drained and discarded. The cooldown is relatively short for such a powerful effect, 90 seconds for all 3 words. With an Amulet of Talos and the Blessing of Talos, you can get this down to a minute or so. This means you can effectively keep a rotating door of zombies active. As one turns to ash, you shout at the next victim to take its place. You become a factory of undeath, churning out soldiers for the grinder. Lore-wise, Durnavir's dialogue when he teaches you is touching in a melancholy way. He calls you Vanquisher, but he also sees you as a fellow traveller on the path of power. He teaches you Soul Tear so that you can call upon his nature even when he cannot be there physically. It's a gift of his essence. In a game filled with gods and Daedra trying to manipulate you, the undead dragon is surprisingly one of the most honest brokers of power. He gives you the gun, he doesn't tell you who to shoot. The shout also bypasses the level cap issues of some lower level reanimation spells. Soul Tear works on powerful enemies, up to a certain point comparable to Dread Zombie. This means it remains viable late into the game. You won't get the target is too powerful error message as often as you do with spells. The voice, as usual, commands with more authority than the hands. One specific ignore factor is simply the shout menu clutter. By the time you get Soul Tear, you have 20 other shouts. Scrolling down to S takes time. It's a UI problem. But for those who hotkey it, it becomes a staple. It's the best opener for a fight against a group. You delete one enemy and gain an ally immediately. The math of the battle shifts instantly in your favour. Imagine the Dragonborn walking into a bandit fort. No weapons drawn. The bandit chief laughs, thinking this traveller is unarmed. The Dragonborn speaks 3 words. The chief's chest caves in, his soul is ripped into a gem, and his body stands up to murder his own wife who is standing next to him. It is dark. It is efficient. It is the definition of overkill. As the zombie finally collapses into a pile of grey ash, blowing away in the wind, the Dragonborn is left with a filled soul gem and a quiet battlefield. The dark magic has done its work, but necromancy is still just manipulating the dead. What if we could manipulate the immortal? What if we could take the creatures that sit at the very top of the food chain, the dragons themselves, and force them to understand the one concept they cannot grasp? We leave the purple skies of the Soul Cairn and look up to the blue skies of Nirn, where a shadow passes over the sun. A dragon roars, believing itself to be eternal. We're about to correct that misconception. We're about to teach a god how to die. From the dusty ash piles of the undead, we look upward. We leave the manipulation of the small trapped souls of men and mer and turn our eyes to the sky, where the true masters of the voice roam. We have talked about freezing blood, slowing time, and tearing souls, but there is one shout that stands apart from the rest. It is not a shout of elements. It is not a shout of nature. It is a shout of pure, distilled hatred. It is a weaponized philosophy. We are talking about Dragonrend. The words are Jor, Zar, Frul, mortal, finite, temporary. This shout is unique in the entire lexicon of the Thu'um because it was not gifted by the gods, nor was it taught by the dragons. It was invented by men. It is the ultimate act of rebellion, forged in the fires of the Dragon War by the ancient tongues, Gormleth Golden Hilt, Hakon One Eye, and Feldir the Old. They created a weapon out of words that dragons simply cannot comprehend. To understand why this shout is so horrifying, and why it is often glossed over as just a quest mechanic by players rushing to finish the main story, you have to understand the psychology of a Dova. Dragons are not just big lizards, they are shards of Akatosh, the dragon god of time. They are by their very nature eternal. They do not age, they do not die of natural causes. The concept of ending is alien to them. They simply are. When the Dragonborn shouts Yorza Frul, they are not hitting the dragon with a magical force. They are forcing the concept of mortality into the dragon's mind. Imagine for a moment that someone shouted a word at you, and suddenly, for 30 seconds, you fully understood, viscerally, emotionally, and physically, what it feels like to be a fourth-dimensional being, or perhaps what it feels like to not exist at all. It would break your mind. That is what Dragonrend does to a dragon. It forces an immortal being to experience the crushing weight of being finite. It imposes the feeling of death, of old age, of rot, of ending, upon a creature that was never meant to feel those things. The result is immediate and catastrophic for the dragon. Overwhelmed by this existential dread, they cannot fly. The concept of flight, of dominating the sky, is linked to their divinity. When you strip away their immortality, you strip away their wings. They crash land. Not because their wings are broken, but because their minds are reeling. They are having a panic attack induced by the sudden realization that they can die. This leads to a core in-game fact that defines the mid to late game experience. Dragonrend is the only shout that allows a melee-focused character to dictate the terms of a dragon fight. Without it, you are at the mercy of the AI's flight patterns. You run around the field, dodging fire, shooting arrows that tickle the dragon's hide, waiting for it to decide to land. It is frustrating. It is passive. But with Dragonrend, you pull them out of the sky on your terms. You see the dragon, circling, you shout the words, and you watch them spiral down, crashing into the dirt, vulnerable to your sword. It turns the hunter into the hunted. The obscure lore tidbit for this section is chilling. We know we learn this shout to defeat Alduin, but have you ever noticed that Paarthurnax, the leader of the Greybeards, cannot teach it to you? It's not just that he refuses, it's that he can't. In his dialogue, he admits that the words are unknown to him. He explains that dragons cannot comprehend the concept of Dragonrend. Their minds reject it like a faulty skin graft. To a dragon, the idea of being temporary is a logical impossibility. Therefore, the Dragonborn must learn it by looking back in time, through the Elder Scroll, to watch the ancient heroes create it. You are learning a language that is fundamentally toxic to dragonkind. This brings us to a massive community debate and a philosophical split among the fanbase. Is using Dragonrend an act of torture? The Greybeards argue that the shout is an abomination. Arngeir warns you that you are taking into yourself the evil of the ancient Nords, their hatred, their anger, their desire to destroy. By learning the shout, are you corrupting your own soul? Are you polluting the way of the voice? Some players argue that Dragonrend is the only evil shout because it was created with malicious intent. Fire Breath is just fire. Unrelenting Force is just a push. But Dragonrend is hate made manifest. When you use it, you're screaming, "I hate you so much that I'm going to make you feel small." It is a shout of oppression, flipped against the oppressors. It suggests that the Dragonborn is not just a hero, but a carrier of an ancient, unresolved grudge. Tactically, however, the morality often takes a backseat to utility. The shout has a relatively short cooldown, 10, 12, and 15 seconds respectively. This is incredibly generous. It means you can keep a dragon grounded almost indefinitely. As soon as the blue glow fades and the dragon tries to take off, you can hit them again. "Sit down," you're saying. "We're not done yet." It trivializes the mobility advantage of the enemy. The visual effect of Dragonrend is a haunting blue energy that coats the dragon. It looks like a heavy mist, or a binding net of light. It contrasts sharply with the fire or frost breath the dragon might be spewing. Under the hood of the game engine, the shout applies a specific script that overrides the dragon's hover and fly states, forcing a landing node search. Watching the AI struggle against this command, trying to fly but being dragged down, is a perfect synchronization of gameplay and lore. You can see the struggle. Let's talk about the specific fight with Alduin at the throat of the world. This is the tutorial for the shout, and it is a masterclass in storytelling through mechanics. Alduin is invincible until you use Dragonrend. Why? Because he is the World Eater. He is the end of time. You cannot kill the end with a sword. You have to make him mortal first. You have to drag him into the realm of the killable. Only when he is glowing with that blue light does his health bar take damage. It implies that Alduin, in his natural state, is not even really there in a physical sense. He is a force of nature. You have to solidify him to hurt him. There is a grim irony in using this shout against Odaviing, the dragon you summon later to take you to Skuldafn. You have to call him, trap him, and negotiate with him. But to trap him, you often use Dragonrend to force him down. You're forcing mortality onto him just long enough to put a collar on his neck. It's a moment of domination that feels distinct from the usual slay the monster loop. You're breaking a wild horse, but the horse is a sentient, immortal demigod. Consider the sound design. The shout itself, Jor Zafrul, sounds harsh. The syllables are sharp, guttural, lacking the flowing cadence of Lok Vakor, Clear Skies. It sounds like a curse, and the sound the dragon makes when hit, it's not a roar of pain. It's a confused, panicked vocalization, a distinct groan of disorientation. It's the sound of a god realizing they're bleeding. The shout also has a psychological effect on the player. Once you have Dragonrend, the fear of dragons evaporates. Early in the game, a shadow passing over the sun makes you sprint for cover. You hide behind rocks. You pray the dragon doesn't see you. But once you have the words, you step out into the open. You draw your weapon. You challenge the sky. It marks the transition from survivor to Dovahkiin. You are no longer reacting to the world is reacting to you. However, there is a limitation. It serves no purpose against non-dragon enemies. Shout Jor Zafrul at a bandit, and nothing happens. The bandit is already mortal. He knows he's going to die. The concept has no power over him because he lives it every day. This specificity makes the shout feel like a specialized tool, a silver bullet for a specific kind of werewolf. It reinforces the idea that the Dragonborn is first and foremost a dragon slayer. There is a subtle tragedy to the shout's existence. It reminds us that the ancient Nords had no hope of winning through strength alone. They couldn't outfight the dragons. They had to outthink them. They had to invent a metaphysical poison. It speaks to the desperation of humanity in the Merethic era. They looked at the gods and said, "If we cannot rise to your level, we will drag you down to ours." And that is exactly what you do. Every time you shout Dragonrend, you are reenacting that ancient revolution. You are pulling the divine down into the muck. As the dragon crashes into the tundra, throwing up a cloud of dirt and snow, its wings broken by the weight of its own mortality, it thrashes in the dirt, clumsy and heavy. It is no longer a majestic creature of the air. It is just a big beast waiting to be put down. The shout has done its work. The god is dead before the final blow is even struck. But dominating the body of a dragon is one thing. Dominating the mind of everything else is another. We have forced the dragon to understand death. Now, Let us go a step further. Let us force the very stones of the earth and the minds of sentient creatures to bend to our desires. We move from the specific hatred of Dragonrend to the absolute terrifying authority of Bend Will. We leave the broken, grounded form of the dragon gasping in the dirt, its mind shattered by the concept of mortality. But as terrifying as Dragonrend is, it is ultimately a weapon of war. It kills the spirit so the body can follow. There is, however, a fate worse than death. There is a power that does not seek to end the enemy, but to own them. We are stepping out of the realm of the ancient Nord heroes and into the slimy, ink-stained pages of Hermaeus Mora's library. We're talking about the ultimate assertion of authority, Bend Will. The words are Goal, Ha, Dov, Earth, Mind, Dragon. If Unrelenting Force is a physical push, Bend Will is a metaphysical stranglehold. This shout is the narrative backbone of the Dragonborn DLC, yet it is frequently pigeonholed by players as the shout that lets you ride dragons. While true, focusing only on the dragon riding mechanic is like using a nuclear reactor to toast a piece of bread. You're ignoring the terrifying implications of the first two words. Let's look at the progression, because it tells a story of escalating dominance. The first word, Goal, Earth, is used to cleanse the Allmaker stones on Solstheim. In gameplay terms, you shout at a glowing rock to free the entranced workers. But look closer at what is happening. Miraak, the first Dragonborn, has infected the very geology of the island with his will. By shouting Goal, you're not just breaking a spell, you're shouting at the earth itself and telling it to stop obeying Miraak and start obeying the natural order again. You're out-shouting a demigod in a debate over who owns the ground you walk on. The second word, Ha, Mind, is where the shout becomes a tool for the sociopathic tactician. This is the aspect most players ignore in favour of standard combat shouts. When you use the two-word shout on an NPC or a creature, they don't just stop attacking, they become your ally. This isn't the subtle manipulation of illusion magic where you trick the brain into being calm. This is a violent rewriting of their conscious reality. Imagine you are fighting a Briarheart Forsworn, a creature of pure rage and nature magic. You shout Golha. Instantly, his allegiance flips. He doesn't just stop fighting. He turns and drives his axe into the skull of the Hagraven he was protecting a second ago. He doesn't do this because he wants to, or because he's been tricked. He does it because his will has been folded and crushed under the weight of yours. You've replaced his self with your command. This leads to a core in-game fact that distinguishes Bend Will from illusion spells. It works on almost anything. Illusion spells are finicky. They have level caps. They fail on undead. They fail on Dwemer machines unless you have specific perks. Bend Will is indiscriminate. It acts as a master key for the sentient mind. It connects to the lore idea that all things in the Orbis are part of the dream, and the Dragonborn with the voice of a dragon has the authority to direct that dream. The third word, Dov, dragon, completes the terrifying trinity. This allows you to force a dragon to land and let you ride it. Now, let's be honest with each other. The actual dragon riding mechanic in Skyrim is, let's call it cinematically restrictive. You don't get full control. You essentially fast travel on a lizard. It's a bit of a letdown if you were expecting a flight simulator, but lore-wise, it is the ultimate humiliation for the dragon. Remember, dragons are proud, dominating creatures. Their will is to power. For a dragon to submit to a rider, to become a beast of burden, implies a total shattering of their ego. You haven't just beaten them, you have domesticated them. You have looked at a shard of the time god and said, "You are my taxi now." The obscure lore tidbit here involves the source of the shout. Unlike Dragonrend, which was created by men, Bend Will was developed by Miraak, likely under the tutelage of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge. The shout is essentially forbidden knowledge weaponized. It represents the corrupting influence of Apocrypha. When you learn these words, you are learning them from the Black Books, absorbing the same dark knowledge that corrupted the first Dragonborn. This fuels a massive community debate. By using Bend Will, is the last Dragonborn slowly becoming Miraak 2.0? The narrative parallel is striking. Miraak wanted to control Solstheim and return to Tamriel to rule. To defeat him, you learn his shout. You use his methods. You bind dragons to your will just as he did. The shout is a manifestation of the will to power. Fans speculate that the more you use it, the closer you drift toward the role of a tyrant. Are you saving Skyrim, or are you just conquering it under new management? Tactically, Bend Will is the superior alternative to Kind's Peace or Animal Allegiance. Those shouts are limited to beasts. Bend Will doesn't care if the target is a bear, a bandit, or a dragon. It unifies the battlefield under a single banner, yours. In a chaotic melee, turning the strongest enemy into a temporary ally swings the damage output drastically. You effectively subtract their DPS from the enemy team and add it to yours, a double swing in value. There is a visual and audio aesthetic to this shout that is distinctively eldritch. The visual effect isn't the clean blue of the voice or the fire of the Yol. It has a distorted, rippling quality, reminiscent of the ink seas of Apocrypha. The sound design includes a deep, warping bass drop that feels like it's vibrating inside your skull. It sounds invasive. It sounds wrong. It fits perfectly with the theme of mind violation. Consider the interaction with the Dragonborn main quest. You must use this shout to progress. It is not optional. The game forces you to become a dominator to save the world. You have to bend the stones. You have to bend the dragon's Saratar. It subtly enforces the idea that in the Elder Scrolls universe, heroism requires a degree of monstrosity. You cannot be a good pacifist and defeat Miraak. You have to be a stronger monster than he is. One often overlooked utility is using Bend Will as a reset button. If you accidentally aggro a friendly NPC, maybe you dropped a sweet roll on a guard's foot and he drew his sword. Using Bend Will, the second word, can force them to yield and reset their hostility. It's a crude form of diplomacy. I'm sorry I hit you, now I command you to forgive me. It saves you from having to reload a save or pay a bounty. It forces forgiveness. The shout also highlights the hierarchy of souls. A dragon's soul is strong, which is why it requires all three words to bend. A human soul is weaker, requiring only two. The earth, strangely, requires only one. This implies that the earth is the most malleable of all, constantly waiting to be shaped by a strong will. It recontextualizes the role of the Dragonborn not just as a warrior, but as a shaper of reality, a tower in the metaphysical sense. Let's look at the horror of the duration. The effect is temporary. When Bend Will wears off, the enemy turns hostile again. Imagine the psychological state of that bandit. For 30 seconds he fought to the death for you, killing his own friends. Then the fog lifts. He sees what he has done. He sees the blood on his hands, and then he sees you, the architect of his nightmare, standing there. The rage he feels in that moment must be infinite, but by then it's usually too late. There is a synergy here with the Azadal equipment set, specifically the Ring of Arcana or the Mask that boosts fire damage if you play a spell sword. But the true synergy is with your own ego. The shout validates the player's agency above all else. In a game where you are the protagonist, Bend Will makes everyone else an extra in your movie. Using Bend Will on a dragon has one more layer of tactical brilliance. While riding the dragon, you are effectively immune to melee damage. You're hovering above the battlefield, raining down fireballs or the dragon's breath. It allows you to disengage from a losing fight, regain your resources, and let the dragon do the heavy lifting. It is the ultimate high ground. But as we leave the realm of mind control and dragon riding, we must acknowledge a vulnerability. Dominating the will requires you to target the enemy. You have to know where they are. You have to see them to shout at them. But what about the enemies you can't see? What about the threats lurking behind the walls, in the dark corners of the ruin? To truly dominate the battlefield, you don't just need to control the minds of those in front of you. You need to know the location of everyone, everywhere, all at once. We move from the loud, booming command of Bend Will to the quiet, pervasive omniscience of the hunter. We're going to learn how to see through stone. From the dizzying heights of riding dragons and the heavy, crushing weight of dominating minds, we descend into the quiet dark. We leave the loud, booming proclamations of authority behind and enter the realm of the whisper. If Bend Will is the shout of the tyrant who demands obedience, our next subject is the shout of the predator who demands information. We're talking about the ultimate tool for the paranoid adventurer, or a whisper. The words are las, ya, near, life, seek, hunt. This shout is criminally undervalued by the sword and board demographic. The players who believe the only way to check for enemies is to walk into a room and see what hits them. But for the thief, the assassin, or the tactician playing on legendary difficulty where a single arrow can end your career, Aura Whisper is not just a utility, it is a lifeline. It is the difference between walking into an ambush and being the ambush. When the Dragonborn whispers, and it is a whisper, the quietest shout in the game, Lazyanir, a wave of sensory magic ripples outward. It passes through stone, through iron doors, through the very earth itself, and then the world lights up. For a generous duration, every living and unliving entity in the vicinity is highlighted with a distinct, glowing red aura. You can see them through walls, you can see them through floors, you can see the slaughterfish waiting in the murky water and the spider hiding on the ceiling. This brings us to the core in-game fact that makes Aura Whisper superior to its magical counterpart, the Detect Life spell. The alteration spell, Detect Life, is flawed. It discriminates. It shows you living people and animals, but it leaves you blind to the undead, the dwarven automatons and the Daedra. To see the dead, you need a separate spell, Detect Dead. You have to juggle spells, wasting magicka and hand slots. Aura Whisper does not care about the biological status of the target. It detects the animus in everything. It lights up the Draugr Deathlord sleeping in his sarcophagus just as brightly as it lights up the bandit eating bread by the fire. It even highlights dwarven spheres curled up in their pipes, waiting to drop on your head. It is a universal radar that discriminates against nothing except privacy. The duration is the other selling point. With all 3 words, the effect lasts for 30 seconds. That is half a minute of absolute omniscience. In a dungeon crawl, 30 seconds is enough to clear 3 rooms, check every corner, and plan a route that avoids every line of sight. It turns the chaotic, dark corridors of a Nordic barrow into a solvable puzzle. You're no longer reacting to jump scares. You're watching the actors get into position before the curtain rises. Finding the words takes you to the corners of Skyrim that feel truly ancient. One word is hidden at the peak of Northwind Summit, guarded by a dragon. Another is in Volunruud, the tomb of the Tung Kavenel, and the third is in the Valthu'um, where you help the spirit Valdar contain the Lich Hevnarak. These are places of death and old magic. It feels appropriate that the shout which reveals the hidden presences of the world is found in places where the dead do not sleep easily. There is an obscure lore tidbit regarding the translation of the words Lazyanir. While Life Seek Hunt is the literal translation, the linguistic structure implies a predatory imperative. The shout isn't asking the universe to show life. It is commanding the dragonborn senses to hunt life. It suggests that dragons perceive other living things primarily as prey. When you use this shout, you are borrowing the sensory apparatus of an apex predator. You aren't seeing people, you are seeing food, or threats, or targets. It shifts the player's perspective from that of a hero to that of a hunter stalking through the brush. The community has long debated the fairness of this shout. Some purists argue that Aura Whisper is essentially wall hacks mandated by the developers. It removes the tension of the dungeon crawl. If you know exactly where the Draugr is, the horror element evaporates. You can pre-fire your arrow as you round the corner. You can place a rune on the exact spot where the enemy will patrol. It trivializes the element of surprise. However, the counter-argument, and the one I tend to side with, is that Aura Whisper is the only thing that makes stealth viable in a game where the AI sometimes has supernatural perception. We've all been detected by a guard who saw us through a solid rock because of a glitch. Aura Whisper levels the playing field. If the game engine is going to cheat, the Dragonborn should be allowed to cheat back. It turns the game from a reaction test into a strategy game like XCOM. You have the intel. Now, can you execute the plan? Let's talk about the specific anxiety of the sleeping Draugr. You know the ones. You walk past a wall niche, and suddenly the lid bursts open, and an overlord shouts you into a spike pit. With Aura Whisper, those niches glow red. You can see the silhouette of the Draugr standing upright inside the wall. It transforms the experience from a jump scare into a moment of smug satisfaction. You can sneak attack them while they're still in the waking up animation, dealing massive damage before they even draw their weapon. It is the ultimate I see you moment. Tactically, this shout is the best friend of the Pacifist or Thief playthrough. If your goal is to steal the item and leave without killing anyone, perhaps for a Thieves Guild quest with a no-kill condition, Aura Whisper is mandatory. You can watch the patrol patterns of the guards through the walls. You can wait until they all turn their backs before slipping through the shadows. It allows for a ghost run when no one even knows you were there. There is also a significant utility in the open world. Have you ever been wandering the plains of Whiterun, heard the combat music start but couldn't find the enemy? You spin around, paranoia setting in. Is it a dragon, a saber cat, a mud crab? Shout Las Yarnir. Instantly, a small red blob lights up in the tall grass 50 feet away. It's a slaughterfish stuck on land. Mystery solved. The shout cuts through the visual noise of the environment, the dense foliage, the snowstorms, the fog, and gives you the raw data. The visual design of the aura is worth noting. It's not just a flat outline. It has a swirling, nebulous quality like smoke or heat haze. It looks like thermal imaging overlaid on a fantasy world. It effectively changes the genre of the game for 30 seconds. You stop playing the Elder Scrolls and start playing Predator. The sound design complements this perfectly. The shout itself is not a roar, but a hissed whisper, like wind moving through dry grass. It doesn't break stealth. You can shout it while crouching right behind an enemy, and they won't hear you. It is the silent killer's best tool. Consider the synergy with arcane archery, or long-range sniping. If you're using a bow that can shoot across the map, or a whisper allows you to line up shots on enemies that the game hasn't even fully rendered visually yet, you're shooting at the red soul signature, not the polygon model. It feels incredibly professional. You are an assassin working off of magical instrumentation. But there is a catch, a small, nagging detail. The shout detects life, seek, hunt. It detects animus. It does not detect traps. It does not show you the tripwire, the pressure plate, or the swinging blade. This is the trap for the over-reliant player. You might be so focused on watching the red glowing enemies through the walls that you walk straight into a bear trap. The shout makes you look at the horizon, making you blind to what is right at your feet. It demands a split attention span. There is also the humorous realization of just how crowded Skyrim actually is. You think you're alone in a quiet cave? Shout or a whisper. Suddenly the walls light up with 50 red dots. Skeevers in the walls, spiders in the ceiling, a fulmer deeper down. It reveals the teeming, crawling reality of the ecosystem. It reminds you that in Skyrim, you are never truly alone. You're just the only one making noise. One obscure interaction involves the quiet casting perk from the illusion tree. While the shout is already quiet, having quiet casting ensures that even the magical hum of the shout is silenced to enemies. With this perk, you can essentially spam the shout every time it comes off cooldown without any risk of detection. You become a walking sonar station. The shout also serves as a great tragic storytelling device. Use it in a city. See the red auras of the children, the beggars, the jarls. They all glow the same. To the eyes of the hunter, a king and a pauper are identical. They are just life to be hunted. It strips away the social constructs and leaves only the biological reality. As the red glow fades from your vision and the world returns to its normal opaque state, you are left with a mental map of the dangers ahead. You know where they are. You know which way they are facing. The element of surprise is entirely yours, but knowing where the enemy is only half the battle. Sometimes the enemy is far away, across a chasm, or on top of a ledge. Sometimes the gap between here and there is too wide for a jump and too dangerous for a walk. You don't just need to see the destination, you need to be there now. We leave the stillness of the hunter's vigil and embrace the rush of kinetic energy. We're about to break the sound barrier. The red aura of the enemy fades from your vision, and you're left with a tactical map burned into your mind. You know where the archer stands, perched on a high ledge across the cavern. You know where the mage waits, behind a wall of fire traps at the end of the hall. Aura Whisper has given you the what and the where. Now you need the how. In the brutal geometry of a Skyrim dungeon, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but that line is often blocked by swinging blades, pressure plates, or 100 feet of empty air. We leave the patience of the hunter behind and embrace the raw kinetic explosion of the sprinter. We are talking about the shout that turns the Dragonborn into a living projectile. We are talking about Whirlwind Sprint. The words are Wuld, Na, Kest, Whirlwind, Fury, Tempest. This shout is often the second taste of power a new Dragonborn receives, gifted by the Greybeards in the courtyard of High Hrothgar. Do you remember that lesson? Master Bori, the silent giant of a monk, steps forward. He doesn't speak, he simply moves. One moment he's standing by the stone pillar, the next he is 20 feet away, the gate clattering shut behind him. It is a lesson not just in speed, but in commitment. When you shout Wuldnar Kest, you are not teleporting. This is a critical distinction that fans and lore scholars often debate. Teleportation, like the Psijic Order's abilities, involves dematerializing and rematerializing. Whirlwind Sprint is pure, unadulterated acceleration. You're moving physically through the space, just fast enough to blur the edges of reality. The wind screams in your ears, the world stretches into a tunnel of light and motion, and for a split second you are faster than gravity. The sensation must be terrifying. Imagine standing still, heavy in plate armor, and then instantly accelerating to highway speeds. The G-force alone should turn the Dragonborn's internal organs into soup. The fact that it doesn't implies that the shout also creates a localized inertial dampener field around the user, a cushion of the whirlwind that protects the body from the physics of its own velocity. You are the storm, and the storm does not crush itself. The core in-game fact that defines this shout is its utility in puzzle solving. It is the only shout in the base game that functions as a literal key. Think of the descent into Ustengrav to retrieve the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. You are faced with 3 stones that glow red when you pass them, opening 3 successive gates. But the gates close too fast for a normal run. You have to line up, sprint past the stones, and shout Wuldnar Kest to shoot through the gap before the iron bars slam down and crush you. It is a moment where the game demands that you integrate the voice into your traversal mechanics. It teaches you that the Thu'um isn't just for killing, it's for moving. But beyond the scripted puzzles, the shout is the ultimate tool for breaking the game's intended pathing. We call it Skyrim parkour. See a chest on a ledge that looks unreachable? A normal player looks for stairs. A master of the voice climbs the nearest rock, lines up the angle and shouts. You launch yourself across the void, landing on the ledge with a heavy thud. You have bypassed the intended route, skipped the traps and claimed the loot. It makes you feel like you are cheating the level designer. This leads to the obscure lore tidbit of the section, the super jump. Physics in the creation engine are, let's say, suggestive rather than absolute. If you use Whirlwind Sprint while running off a ledge, your forward momentum is preserved, but gravity still applies. This creates a parabolic arc of travel that allows you to clear massive canyons. You can launch yourself from the College of Winterhold's bridge and land on the glaciers far below, provided you have become ethereal ready for the landing or really strong knees. Speedrunners use this constantly to skip entire sections of the map. In the lore, this could be interpreted as the Dragonborn learning to walk on the wind itself, a step toward true flight. Tactically, Whirlwind Sprint is the hard counter to the kiting enemy. We all hate the Necromancer who runs backward, casting ice spikes to slow you down, keeping just out of sword range. It is a frustrating game of tag. Whirlwind Sprint ends that game. You shout, and suddenly you are in their face. The look of panic on the mage's face, if the engine allowed for facial expressions of panic, would be priceless. You have closed the gap of 50 feet in 0 seconds. You're inside their guard before they can charge their next spell. It is the gap closer of legends. Conversely, it is also the panic button for escape. When you're surrounded by Fulmer in a dark tunnel, poisoned, bleeding, and out of potions, Whirlwind Sprint is your exit strategy. You blast through the enemy line, leaving them swinging at empty air. By the time they turn around, you're already halfway down the next corridor, hiding in the shadows to heal. It gives you the ability to dictate the spacing of the fight. However, there is a slapstick element to this power that cannot be ignored. We have all done it. You misjudge the distance. You're in a small room. You mean to shout Fus, but you shout Wuld. You launch yourself face first into a stone wall at 80 miles per hour. The thud sound effect, followed by the screen shake and the confused groan of the Dragonborn, is peak Skyrim comedy. It reminds us that power without control is just a really fast way to get a concussion. The community often debates the canon power of the shout compared to the in-game limitations. In the lore, the ancient Nords could supposedly use this to cross entire battlefields in a blink. In the game, you go about 20 yards. Fans theorize that the Dragonborn's version is watered down because we haven't spent decades meditating on the word Kest, Tempest, like the Greybeards have. Master Bori's sprint seems smoother, longer, more effortless. Ours feels like a rocket jump, explosive and short. It suggests that we are using the brute force version of the shout, while the masters use the refined version. Let's not forget the walk of shame utility. You are over-encumbered. You picked up one too many dragon bones. You're walking at a snail's pace. You cannot fast travel. What do? You use Whirlwind Sprint on cooldown. It is the only way to move quickly while carrying 3 tons of loot. You lurch forward, wait for the cooldown, and lurch forward again. It looks ridiculous. A hero burdened by greed, shouting at the air to drag his heavy backpack a few feet closer to the merchant. But it works. It is the shout of the hoarder. Finding the words takes you to Dead Men's Respite, the tomb of Olaf One-Eye. This is significant. Olaf was a tongue, a master of the voice who supposedly shouted the dragon Numenex into submission. It feels right that his tomb holds the secret to the Tempest. He was a man of action, a king who took what he wanted. Whirlwind Sprint is the shout of a conqueror who refuses to wait. Another word lies in Volskiga, guarded by a dragon priest. To learn the speed of the wind, you must defeat the stationary guardians of the past. Visually, the shout is subtle but effective. The screen edges blur with a radial blur effect simulating high velocity. Small white streaks of wind appear around the character model. The sound design is a sharp, inhaling whoosh, followed by a sonic boom. It sounds like a whip cracking. It emphasizes the suddenness of the movement. There is a synergy with the silent roll perk in the sneak tree. If you whirlwind sprint while crouching, which acts strangely in the engine, often resulting in a super fast roll, you become a bowling ball of stealth. You're a silent, invisible missile. You can roll from shadow to shadow across a lit room before the guards' detection meters can even begin to fill. It is the closest the game gets to a ninja dash. But the true joy of Whirlwind Sprint is the feeling of freedom. Skyrim is a big place. Walking takes time. Horses are clunky. Whirlwind Sprint makes the world feel traversable. It turns the landscape into a playground. You see a gap between 2 rooftops in solitude. You jump it. You see a river. You sprint over the surface, if you time it right or just splash into the middle. It allows the Dragonborn to interact with the verticality of the world in a way that no other mechanic permits. Consider the roleplay of a pure warrior who disdains magic. He doesn't use teleportation spells. He doesn't use levitation. He uses his lungs and his legs. Whirlwind Sprint is the physical prowess of the warrior taken to its supernatural extreme. It is the logical conclusion of athletics as a skill. You're just running really hard. As the wind settles and you skid to a halt, dust kicking up around your boots, you look back at where you were a second ago. You've crossed the gap. You have closed the distance. You have defied the limitations of your heavy armor and your mortal legs. But crossing the gap is only useful if you can handle what is on the other side. Sometimes, the enemy you rush toward is holding a weapon that can end you in a single swing. Sometimes, the best way to win the fight isn't to be faster, or stronger, or smarter. Sometimes the best way to win is to simply take away their ability to fight back. We move from the kinetic joy of the sprint to the cruel humiliation of the disarm. We are about to strip the warrior of his pride. You have sprinted across the chasm. You're now standing nose to nose with the bandit chief. He is winding up a swing with a Daedric warhammer that is roughly the size of a small car. In this moment, you have a choice. You could block, hoping your stamina holds. You could dodge. Or you could simply decide that he is no longer allowed to be holding a hammer. We are moving from the traversal of space to the traversal of dignity. We are talking about disarm. The words are Zun, Hal, Vik, weapon, hand, defeat. This shout is the ultimate act of trolling in the Elder Scrolls universe. It is often ignored by players because it deals no direct damage. It doesn't empty the red bar at the top of the screen. But damage is temporary, humiliation is forever. Disarm attacks the enemy's capability, not their vitality. It turns a lethal gladiator into a confused bar patron trying to start a fistfight with a tank. When the Dragonborn shouts Zunhal Vik, a wave of kinetic force specifically tuned to the frequency of grip strength washes over the enemy. The result is one of the most satisfying sounds in the game engine, the distinct metallic clatter of a weapon hitting the stone floor. The enemy's hands fly open, their weapon is ripped from their grasp by an invisible force, and it becomes a free-floating physics object. It creates an immediate moment of panic in the AI. The script governing the NPC suddenly realizes, error. Weapon missing. You can see the hesitation. They look at their empty hands, they look at you. Then, depending on their programming, they do one of two things. They either bravely and foolishly put up their fist to box you, or they scramble around the floor like a person who lost their contact lens, trying to pick their sword back up. This leads to a core in-game fact that is both a strength and a weakness. The weapon becomes a real object in the world. This means if you're fighting on a bridge, a cliff edge, or near a deep body of water, and you shout "Disarm," that weapon isn't just dropped. It is gone. It goes clattering off the edge, tumbling down the mountain, lost to the void. If the bandit chief was holding a generic steel axe, this is hilarious. If he was holding a unique artifact weapon that you wanted to loot, well, the joke is on you. You just shouted your loot into the abyss. But the true reason this shout lives in the ignored pile for many high-level players is the level cap. Unlike Unrelenting Force, which always staggers, Disarm has a hard limit. The 3-word shout only affects enemies up to level 30. This means that against the highest tier enemies, the Draugr Death Overlords, the Vampire Masters, the Ebony Warrior, the shout simply washes over them with a shout-resisted message. It's a frustrating mechanic that phases the shout out of relevance in the late game. However, for the first 50 hours of a playthrough, it is the king of crowd control. The obscure lore tidbit here lies in the translation itself: weapon, hand, defeat. The shout doesn't target the weapon, it targets the connection between the warrior and the tool. It creates a localized failure of the hand. It's a subtle distinction, but it implies that the voice is severing the bond of mastery. In Nord culture, where your sword is your life, stripping a warrior of his blade is a symbolic castration. You're reducing them to a child. You're telling them they are not worthy of the steel they carry. There is a massive community debate, or rather a collective community trauma surrounding this shout. It is one of the few shouts that enemies use against the player frequently. We all have that memory. You are deep in a Nordic ruin, level 45, wielding your legendary, smithing-improved, double-enchanted dragonbone sword that you named World Ender. A Draugr Deathlord pops out of a sarcophagus and shouts Zunhal Viek. Suddenly your hands are empty. World Ender is gone. The panic that sets in is visceral. You are frantically looking at the floor. The dungeon is dark. The floor is covered in debris, bones and mushrooms. Where is the sword? Did it clip through the floor? Did it slide behind a chest? Meanwhile, the Draugr is hacking at you with an ebony axe. This experience, the fear of losing your best gear, makes players hate this shout, but it also teaches you to respect it. When you turn that power around and use it on the enemy, it feels like sweet, petty revenge. "How do you like it?" you whisper, as you kick their glass greatsword into a corner. Tactically, Disarm is the best answer to the glass cannon enemy. You know the type. The two-handed bandit marauder wearing fur armor but wielding a warhammer that can one-shot you on legendary difficulty. He has low health, but massive damage output. Disarm him, and he becomes a joke. He is just a guy in a fur loincloth trying to punch a plate mail-clad demigod. You can take your time, you can toy with him. It removes the threat instantly without needing to deplete his health pool. There is also a wonderful synergy with the thief playstyle. When the enemy drops their weapon, it is technically no longer equipped. If you are quick, and I mean really quick, you can snatch the weapon off the ground before they pick it up. Now it's in your inventory. They are scrambling for a weapon that you're now holding. It is the ultimate finders keepers. Even better, if you have a high pickpocket skill, you can steal their backup dagger before the fight even starts, leaving them with absolutely nothing to switch to when you disarm their main weapon. Finding the words takes you to some significant locations. One word is in Snowvale Sanctum, the site of the Thieves Guild questline where Mercer Frey betrays you. This feels thematically appropriate. Disarm is a trickster's shout, a tool of betrayal and subversion. It fits Mercer's style perfectly. Another word is at Elder's Blood Peak, a dragon lair, and the third is in Silverdrift Lair. Collecting these requires you to engage with the world's darker corners, places where honour is often in short supply. Let's talk about the visual comedy of the shout. The physics engine in Skyrim is enthusiastic. Sometimes, when you hit a weapon with disarm, it doesn't just drop, it launches. It ricochets off the walls. I have seen a shield fly off an arm, hit a ceiling beam, bounce off a wall and kill a skeever in the corner. It turns the battlefield into a pinball machine. There is a specific interaction with dual-wielding enemies, like the Forsworn Ravagers. Disarm usually only strips the main hand weapon, depending on the patch and version. This leaves them awkwardly holding one dagger in their left hand, swinging wildly with their offhand while their main hand grasps at nothing. It breaks their combat rhythm completely. They lose their flurry attacks, their high DPS combos. They become uncoordinated. The sound design deserves a nod here. The shout, Zunhal Vik, is sharp, percussive. It sounds like a command, and the follow-up sound of the weapon hitting the ground is crucial. In a chaotic fight, that clang is your audio cue that the threat is neutralized. You don't even need to see it happen. You hear the metal hit the stone, and you know you're safe to turn your back on that guy and focus on the mage. However, we must address the bug or feature where friendly NPCs can be affected. If you use this in a chaotic city brawl, perhaps defending against vampires, you might accidentally disarm the town guards. Suddenly the brave guards of Whiterun are punching vampires. Afterward, they will often fail to pick their shields and swords back up, leaving the city permanently defended by guys who lost their gear. It's a lasting consequence of your shout that leaves the city looking a bit budget-strapped. Consider the roleplay of a pacifist monk or a non-lethal run. This shout is your bread and butter. You don't want to kill the bandits, you just want them to stop attacking you so you can pass. You disarm them, cast calm and walk away. You leave them alive but humbled, searching for their rusty iron swords in the grass. It is a mercy of a sort, a humiliating mercy. There is also a psychological element to the shout when used on archers. Archers are annoying, they backpedal, they hide. Shout Zunhal Vik at a group of archers, and they are forced to charge you. They pull out their tiny daggers and run into melee range, right where you want them. It forces the enemy to play your game. It converts ranged units into melee units against their will. The shout reminds us that a warrior is nothing without their tools. The Dragonborn is powerful naked, especially with the shout we discussed earlier, dragon aspect. But a bandit? A Thalmor soldier? Without their enchanted mace, they are just a soft bag of hit points. Disarm exposes the fragility of their power. It strips away the steel shell and reveals the frightened person underneath. And let's be honest, there is a specific joy in using this on the Thalmor. Seeing a high elf, so arrogant in his gilded elven armour, scrambling on his hands and knees in the mud to find his sword while you stand over him. It is a poetic justice that transcends damage numbers. It is a cultural victory. As the last weapon clatters to the floor, and the once proud warriors are reduced to a disorganised boxing club, the Dragonborn stands amidst the confusion, untouched. You have stripped them of their pride, their tools and their threat. But sometimes stripping the enemy of their weapon isn't enough. Sometimes the enemy is too entrenched. They are behind cover, they are heavy, they are grounded. Sometimes you don't just want to take their sword, you want to take their footing, you want to pick them up and throw them away. We move from the precision of disarming to the chaotic, upward violence of the tornado. We are about to send them to the Cloud District, literally. The enemy stands before you, weaponless and confused, their sword lying uselessly on the flagstones. You have stripped them of their dignity and their steel. But they are still standing on their own 2 feet. They still have gravity on their side. And sometimes, to truly win a fight, or just to amuse yourself in the monotonous grind of bandit clearing, you need to take away their footing. You need to introduce them to the upper atmosphere. We are moving from the horizontal push of Unrelenting Force to the vertical chaos of the Solstheim Special. We are talking about Cyclone, the words of Ven, Gar, Nos, Wind, Unleash, Strike. This shout is often overlooked simply because it lives on the island of Solstheim, hidden behind the Dragonborn DLC content. By the time many players reach the ash-covered shores of Ravenrock, they are already set in their ways, they have their favourite shouts, they are comfortable. But Cyclone is the shout that begs you to break your routine. It is the shout that asks, what if we took Fus Ro Dah but made it a tornado? When the Dragonborn shouts Vengar knows, they are not projecting a wall of force. They are summoning a localised meteorological event. A swirling vortex of wind, ash, and magic manifests in front of you and travels forward. It doesn't move instantly like a lightning bolt. It travels with a menacing, deliberate pace. When it connects with an enemy, or a group of enemies, it doesn't just push them back, it picks them up, it spins them, and then it launches them straight up into the air. The result is a spectacle of ragdoll physics that is honestly one of the technological highlights of the creation engine. We aren't talking about a little hop. We're talking about sending a Reaver Lord 20 feet into the air, limbs flailing, screaming as he rotates like a helicopter blade. It turns a gritty fantasy battle into a slapstick comedy routine instantly. Watching a heavily armoured orc ragdoll upwards, stall at the apex of the launch, and then plummet back down is a joy that never truly fades, but beneath the comedy lies a brutal mechanical reality: full damage. This is the core in-game fact that makes Cyclone a hidden DPS monster. In Skyrim, full damage is calculated based on velocity and distance. When you blast an enemy with Unrelenting Force on flat ground, they slide back. They take the shout damage and that's it. But when you hit them with Cyclone, they take the initial damage of the shout, the trauma of being spun around, and then, crucially, they take massive damage when they hit the floor. The gravity of Nirn becomes your weapon. Against enemies with high armor ratings but standard health pools, this full damage often kills them outright. You're essentially letting the ground do the killing for you. Finding the words for this shout forces you to explore the distinct alien landscape of Solstheim. It isn't found in the familiar Nordic barrows of the mainland. One word lies in Whiteridge. Barrow, a place infested with albino spiders and the terrifying experiments of a mad Dunmer mage. Another is in Benkongarike, a reekling-infested ice cave that smells of fish and unwashed goblin. The third is atop the summit of Saring's Watch, where you must interrupt a dragon who is in the middle of a business meeting with some Draugr. These locations feel wilder, harsher. They reflect the nature of the shout. Solstheim is a land of ash storms and violent geology. Cyclone is the embodiment of that hostility. The obscure lore tidbit here lies in the linguistic breakdown of the words. Ven means wind, which is standard, but Gar means unleash. This word is rarely used in other shouts. It implies a lack of control, a releasing of bonds, and Nos means strike. The combination, Wind Unleash Strike, suggests that this shout is less about the disciplined way of the voice, practiced by the Greybeards, and more about the raw, chaotic nature of the Allmaker's wind. It feels like a shout that belongs to the Skaal, to the shamans who worship the wind as a living spirit, rather than the monks who study it as a philosophy. It is primal. It is the wind off the Sea of Ghosts that strips the flesh from the bone. The community debate, naturally, is the Cyclone versus Unrelenting Force showdown. Which is better? Unrelenting Force is faster, snaps out instantly, and has that iconic status. But fans of Cyclone argue that the crowd control is superior because it keeps enemies in the same general area, just vertical. When you Fus Ro Dah a group of bandits, you scatter them. You have to chase them down to loot them. When you Cyclone them, they go up, they come down, and they land in a neat pile right in front of you, albeit with some broken legs. It clusters the enemies for follow-up attacks, like a well-placed fireball, or a sweep with a greatsword as they try to stand up. Tactically, Cyclone excels in open field combat, where there are no cliffs to push people off. In the plains of Whiterun or the ash wastes of Solstheim, Unrelenting Force loses its lethal edge because there is no environmental hazard. Cyclone brings the hazard with it. It creates a vertical cliff wherever you stand. It is also remarkably effective against heavy enemies like bears and saber cats. These creatures are fast and hit hard, but they have large hitboxes that catch the tornado easily. Seeing a snowy saber cat swirling in the air is a satisfying revenge for all the times they jumped you from behind a tree. There is a specific interaction with dual-casting destruction magic. If you launch an enemy into the air with Cyclone, their trajectory is predictable. This makes them the perfect target for mid-air juggling. A skilled mage can hit the airborne target with an ice spike or thunderbolt while they are helpless at the apex of their flight. It requires timing, but pulling it off makes you feel like you are playing a fighting game, performing a juggle combo. Launch, zap, splat. It is a rhythm of violence that feels incredible. Let's talk about the visual design. The tornado itself is small, tight, and filled with debris. It looks gritty. It doesn't look like the clean magic of the college, it looks like dirty weather. And the sound, Vengarnos, has a whistling, high-pitched quality, followed by the roaring whoosh of the vortex. The audio cue of the enemy screaming as they ascend is, admittedly, dark humour at its finest. Nazim, asking if you get to the Cloud District, often takes on a whole new meaning when you can literally send him there. However, there is a jank factor, or perhaps a charm, to the physics. Sometimes the tornado interacts with the geometry of the room in weird ways. If you use it in a low-ceilinged dungeon corridor, the enemies smack into the ceiling. This adds an extra layer of impact damage, ceiling damage plus floor damage, effectively dribbling the bandit like a basketball. But sometimes they get stuck in the ceiling geometry, their legs dangling helplessly as they glitch out. While technically a bug, it's a hilarious form of incapacitation. You live in the ceiling now, bandit. That is your home. Consider the roleplay of a Stormlord character. You wear the Stormcloak officer armour, the bear hat, you wield a Nordic battle axe, and you use Stormcall outdoors and Cyclone indoors. You are the avatar of the storm. You don't use fire or stealth, you use wind and lightning. Cyclone completes this build by giving you a short-range wind weapon to complement the long-range lightning. It creates a cohesive theme that feels lore-friendly and terrifying. One distinct advantage of Cyclone is that it travels. You can shout it down a hallway, and it will sweep up everyone in the line. Unrelenting Force is a cone that dissipates. Cyclone is a moving hazard. You can fire and forget. You can shout the tornado, then turn around and fight the guy behind you, knowing that the guys in front of you are about to be busy being airborne for the next 5 seconds. It acts as a momentary wall of denial. There is also the matter of weight classes. Interestingly, Cyclone seems to have a higher stagger threshold than some other shouts. It can lift enemies that seem too heavy to lift. Giants, however, are usually immune to the full launch. They just stumble, which is a shame. The dream of launching a giant into orbit, reversing the giant space program bug, remains a dream for the modding community to fulfill. But against humanoid NPCs, it is the great equalizer. That vampire master who's dodging your arrows with supernatural speed, he can't dodge a tornado. Once he's in the air, he can't cast his Drain Life spell. He is just a floating target. It breaks the AI's combat scripts completely. They don't know how to fight while falling. The shout also serves as a fantastic breather tool. In the chaos of a battle, when your screen is flashing red and you're out of stamina launching, the immediate threats into the air gives you exactly enough time to pop a potion, regenerate some stamina and reposition. By the time they hit the ground and stand up, which takes a surprisingly long animation, you are ready to kill them. It buys you time, the most valuable currency in combat. As the dust settles and the enemies crash back down to earth, their bodies broken by the fall, the Dragonborn stands amidst the settling debris. You have commanded the wind to unleash its strike, and the earth has punished those who dared to leave it. But sometimes the Dragonborn does not want to fight alone. Sometimes the zombie from Soul Tear is too mindless, and the Bend Will ally is too temporary. Sometimes you need a true brother in arms. You need someone who understands the voice, someone who has fought these battles before. You need to call upon the legends of the past. We move from the chaotic wind of Solstheim to the golden halls of Sovngarde. We are about to summon a hero. The dust from the cyclone settles, and the broken bodies of your enemies lie scattered across the stone floor. But the air is still heavy. The dungeon is deep, the night is long, and sometimes even the Dragonborn feels the crushing weight of solitude. We have spent this entire journey discussing how to manipulate the world, how to freeze it, push it, tear it, and dominate it. But there is a loneliness to that kind of power. Sometimes you don't want to be a god. Sometimes you just want a friend. Or, more specifically, you want a legendary dragon slayer from the dawn of time to watch your back. We are stepping beyond the veil of mortality, reaching not into the earth or the mind, but into the golden halls of Aetherius itself. We are talking about Call of Valor. The words are Hun, Kal, Zur, hero, champion, legend. This shout is the reward for completing the main quest line, a parting gift from Tsun, the shield thane of Shore after you defeat Alduin in Sovngarde. Because it comes so late in the game, often after the player has already crafted their god tier armour and weapons, it is frequently relegated to the trophy section of the shout menu. It sits there, unused, a sentimental reminder of a trip to heaven. But to ignore Call of Valor is to ignore the most potent summoning spell in the entire franchise. When you shout Hunkal Zur, you are tearing a hole in the fabric of reality that separates Mundus from Sovngarde. You aren't summoning a mindless Atronach or a groaning zombie that turns to ash in 60 seconds. You're summoning a sentient legendary hero who has already proven themselves worthy of the Hall of Valor. you're calling in the old guard. The mechanic here is unique because the duration of your button press determines who answers the call. This is a core in-game fact that adds a layer of tactical depth often missed by button mashers. Shout one word, Hun, and you summon Gormleth Goldenhilt. Shout 2, Hun Karl, and you get Feldir the Old. Shout 3, Hun Karl Zur, and Hakon One-Eye steps from the mist. Each of these heroes brings a different archetype to the fight. Gormleth is the aggressor, a dual-wielding, bow-shooting Valkyrie who rushes into combat with a reckless abandon that borders on suicidal. Except she's already dead, so it's just enthusiasm. Feldir is the battle mage of the group, wielding a great sword but relying heavily on offensive shouts. Hakon is the tank, a heavy-hitting axe wielder who draws aggro and refuses to yield. Unlike the standard follower AI, which can be wonky and passive, the heroes of Sovngarde have their aggression sliders turned up to 11. They didn't get into Valhalla by being cautious. They want to fight. They need to fight. Tactically, this shout solves the lonely stealth archer problem. If you are a squishy build, relying on shadows and distance, getting cornered by a boss is a death sentence. Call of Valor gives you an instant invincible feeling tank, and I say, invincible feeling. Because while they have health bars, they are incredibly durable. They are decked out in ancient Nord armour that glows with a spectral, starry purple haze, the visual language of the cosmos. They look like they are made of the night sky itself. But the real power lies in the fact that they are dragonborn, or at least tongues. They use shouts. This is the game changer. When you summon Hakon or Gormleth, you aren't just adding a sword to the fight, you're adding another voice. They will use Unrelenting Force, Frost Breath, and Disarm. Suddenly, the battlefield is echoing with twice the sonic booming. It creates a chaotic, noisy, glorious mess where enemies are being ragdolled not just by you, but by your ghostly best friend. It turns a duel into a team sport. The obscure lore tidbit here is deeply tied to who these people actually are. These aren't random generated NPCs. These are the 3 ancient Nord heroes who originally overthrew the dragon cult. They are the ones who invented Dragonrend. They are the ones who fought Alduin atop the throat of the world in the Merethic era and used an Elder Scroll to banish him. When you summon them, you're fighting alongside historical figures. Imagine being a modern soldier and being able to radio in Achilles or Miyamoto Musashi for air support. That is the level of clout the Dragonborn is flexing here. There is a fascinating interaction with the cooldown. The shout has a long cooldown, 180 seconds for the full 3 words. This balances its power. You cannot have them permanently active like a thrall. However, the summoned hero stays for 60 seconds. This leaves a 2-minute window where you are on your own. This rhythm dictates the flow of a long dungeon. You summon them for the big room, or the boss, then you wait. It makes their arrival feel special, an event rather than a passive buff. The community debate surrounding Call of Valor often touches on the metaphysics of the summon. Are we pulling their actual souls from Sovngarde? If so, is that rude? Imagine Gormleth is in the middle of a mead-chugging contest with Isgramor, having the time of her afterlife, and suddenly she's yanked away to a damp cave in the Reach to fight a few Falmer because the Dragonborn was too lazy to swing a sword. Some players argue it's a disruption of their eternal rest. Others argue that for a Nord, eternal rest is fighting. To be called back to Nirn to slay more elves or dragons is probably the best vacation they could ask for. It's like being called out of retirement for one last job. Visually, the shader effect on the heroes is one of the most beautiful in the game. It isn't the sickly blue of the ghosts in standard dungeons, nor the purple of the soul cairn. It has a golden, shimmering undercurrent beneath the purple, mimicking the sky of Sovngarde. They light up dark areas. They look divine. It reinforces the idea that the Dragonborn is a bridge between the mortal world and the divine realm. Consider the roleplay implications of the specific hero you choose. Gormleth is often the fan favourite because of her dialogue. She screams, "Skyrim belongs to the Nords," and "Victory or Sovngarde," with such infectious energy. Having her around makes the battle feel like a crusade. Feldir, on the other hand, feels more sombre, a reminder of the cost of the Dragon War. He was the one who made the hard choice to use the scroll. Summoning him feels like consulting a wise, dangerous grandfather. There is also a hidden utility in testing traps. The heroes are immune to poison and drowning, and while they take damage from traps, they regenerate quickly. You can send Hakon down a hallway filled with swinging blades. He might grunt a few times, but he will trigger the pressure plates, clearing the path for you. It's not the most respectful way to treat a legendary hero of antiquity, but hey, if they survived Alduin, they can survive a spinning blade trap. One specific ignore factor is that the shout occupies the same mental slot as Summon Dremora Lord or Lucian Lachance. Conjuration mages often feel they don't need this shout because they already have summons, but Call of Valor does not count against your Separation Conjuration limit in most patch versions and unmodded games, though this is inconsistent. In theory, you can have 2 Dremora Lords and Haakon One Eye active simultaneously. You can walk around with a 4-person kill squad. You become the leader of a small army. The shout also has a unique psychological effect on the player. Skyrim is a game about being the chosen one. You're the only Dragonborn, mostly. But Call of Valor reminds you that you are part of a lineage. You're standing on the shoulders of giants. When you fight alongside them, you aren't just a solo protagonist, you are the latest chapter in a long history of rebellion. Let's talk about the use of this shout against Kasteg. Kastag is the hidden super boss of the Dragonborn DLC, a frost giant ghost who hits like a freight train. Summoning a hero of Sovngarde is one of the few ways to distract him. While Kastag is pounding Haakon into the ice, and Haakon is taking it like a champ, you can actually get some damage in. Without that distraction, Kastag focuses solely on you, which usually results in a reload screen. The heroes serve as the ultimate damage sponge for the game's hardest content. The sound design of the summon is distinct, a horn blast. Not the grey, windy sound of other shouts, but a clear, resonant note that sounds like a Gyala horn. It cuts through the combat music. It announces that the cavalry has arrived. There is a melancholy to the shout as well. When the 60 seconds are up, the hero doesn't die. They fade. They dissolve back into the golden mist, returning to the feast. There is no goodbye. They are just gone. It leaves the Dragonborn alone again in the silence of the dungeon, surrounded by corpses, the only living thing for miles. It emphasizes the transient nature of help in this world. You can visit the past, but you cannot live there. As the golden shimmer of Haakon One Eye fades into the dungeon gloom, leaving you once again in the company of the dead and the dark, you realize that while allies are useful, they are temporary. The only thing you can truly rely on is your own flesh, your own soul, and your own power. We have reached the end of our list. We have explored the shouts that manipulate the elements, the mind, time, and death. But there is one shout left. The ultimate shout. The shout that does not project power outward, but turns it inward. The shout that reveals the true nature of the Dovahkiin. We are about to shed our mortal skin and show the world what we really are. The golden ghost of the ancient tongue has faded. The echoes of the hornblast have died away. The Dragonborn stands alone in the deepest chamber of the barrow, the silence pressing in from all sides. We have spent this night exploring the tools of the trade, the shouts that manipulate time, weather, minds, and souls. We have looked outward, projecting our will onto the world to bend it into a shape that pleases us. But for our final entry, we must look inward. We must stop asking the universe to change and instead change the one thing we have total control over, ourselves. We have arrived at the pinnacle of the Thu'um. We are talking about the ultimate transformation. We are talking about dragon aspect. The words are Mul, Quaer, Div, Strength, Armour, Worm. This shout is the narrative and mechanical climax of the Dragonborn DLC. It is the answer to the question that hangs over the entire game. What does it mean to have the soul of a dragon in the body of a mortal? When you speak these words, you are no longer hiding that nature. You are letting it bleed through the skin. You are manifesting the inner avatar. When the Dragonborn shouts Mulka Div, the visual effect is arguably the most spectacular in the entire game. A spectral, ethereal suit of armour creates an overlay on your character. It is comprised of flowing, translucent energy, fiery orange and gold that forms the shape of dragon scales, a chess piece, gauntlets, and a helmet that mimics the head of a Dova. It pulses with power. It creates a silhouette that is larger than life, turning the human, elf, or beast race character into a hulking entity of pure dominance. But this isn't just a cosmetic light show. The mechanics behind Dragon Aspect are game-breaking in the best possible way. This shout is a self-buff of the highest order. It grants a massive increase to armor rating, up to 100 points, increases power attack damage by 25%, and increases fire and frost resistance. However, the stat that true masters of the lore care about is the shout cooldown reduction. With all 3 words, Dragon Aspect reduces the cooldown of all other shouts by 20%. This leads to a core in-game fact that enables the shout spam build. If you combine Dragon Aspect, 20% reduction, with an Amulet of Talos, 20% reduction, and the Blessing of Talos, 20% reduction, and perhaps a Dragon Priest mask like Morocco or specialized modded gear, you can reduce your shout cooldowns to near 0. You essentially become a machine gun of words. You can shout Unrelenting Force, and by the time the enemy hits the wall, you're ready to shout Fire Breath. You enter an avatar state where the voice becomes your primary weapon, flowing continuously without pause. It is the closest the player ever gets to feeling like an actual dragon, who breathes fire as easily as we breathe air. Finding the words is a journey that spans the breadth of Solstheim and the twisted realm of Apocrypha. The first word is found in the Raven Rock mine guarded by the puzzle of the Bloodskull Blade. It is a cinematic moment, unlocking the door with the energy beam of the sword to find the word wall. The other words are hidden within Hermaeus Mora's Black Books. To learn the full shout, you must literally read the forbidden knowledge of the Daedric Prince of Fate. It implies that this power, the power to manifest your true self, requires you to look into the abyss. The obscure lore tidbit for this shout involves a hidden mechanic that the game does not tell you about. If your health drops below 50% while Dragon Aspect is active, a spectral ancient dragonborn is automatically summoned to fight by your side. This isn't a hero of Sovngarde. This is a generic, unnamed dragonborn from the Merethic era. He uses Frost Breath and Unrelenting Force. This implies a terrifying lore reality. The Dragonborn is not just one person. The concept of the Dragonborn is a lineage, a shared soul stream. When you're in danger, the past avatars of Akatosh manifest to protect the current vessel. You're never truly alone because you are carrying the weight of all who came before you in your blood. The community debate surrounding Dragon Aspect often centers on the visual storytelling compared to the villain, Miraak. Miraak also uses Dragon Aspect, but his version is different. Yours is gold and orange, warm, heroic, perhaps tied to Akatosh's solar nature. Miraak's aspect is purple and sickly green, reflecting the corruption of Hermaeus Mora and the influence of the tentacles of Apocrypha. It creates a visual duality, the pure dragon versus the corrupted dragon. Fans debate whether the Dragonborn's gold colour signifies their resistance to Mora's influence, or if it simply represents a different kind of power. Are we the sun to Miraak's void? Tactically, this shout is the boss killer. Because of its limitation, it can only be used once per day, you cannot waste it on mud crabs. This restriction makes it feel special. In a game where you can chug 500 cheese wheels in a second, resources are rarely scarce, but a once per day power forces you to make a choice. Is this fight worth it? When you finally trigger it against the Ebony Warrior or Karstag, it feels like an event. You are powering up. You are going Super Saiyan, to borrow a term from another medium. There is a distinct audio cue that plays while the shout is active, a low, rhythmic thrumming, like a giant heartbeat, accompanied by the sound of wind rushing through a canyon. It drowns out the ambient music, it focuses the player, it signals that for the next few minutes you are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Let's talk about the aesthetic of the arms. When you power attack with Dragon Aspect active, the spectral dragon arms overlay your own. If you are unarmed, using a Khajiit Brawler build for instance, it looks like you are clawing the enemy with giant energy talons. It makes the unarmed, badass build visually viable. You aren't just punching them, you're mauling them with the ghost of a dragon. The shout also serves as a thematic bookend to the Dragonborn DLC. The DLC is about identity. Miraak claims he is the true Dragonborn. You claim the title. By learning Dragon Aspect, you prove it. You prove that your soul is strong enough to project itself outward into physical reality. The armor is not something you wear, it is something you are. It suggests that the humanoid body is just a shell, a container that is barely containing the cosmic energy inside. Dragon Aspect is the container cracking open. However, there is a vulnerability. The cooldown reduction and armor boost are significant, but they don't make you invincible. You can still die. and if you die while in dragon aspect, the visual tragedy is potent. The armour flickers and fades as you collapse. The dragon spirit retreats, leaving only the broken mortal body on the floor. It reminds us that no matter how close to godhood we get, we are still tethered to the fragile flesh. Consider the roleplay of the Ascendant Dragonborn. By the end of the game, you have defeated the World Eater, the Vampire Lord, and the first Dragonborn. You're effectively a demigod. Wearing standard steel or Daedric armour feels almost beneath you. You don't need metal plates, you have your soul. Using dragon aspect as your primary armour for major fights fits the narrative of a being who has outgrown the need for blacksmithing. There is also a fascinating synergy with the Dragonrend shout we discussed earlier. Imagine the visual, you, clad in the spectral armour of a dragon, shouting a dragon out of the sky with Dragonrend. To the dragon, this must be the ultimate horror. A small, two-legged creature that looks like a dragon, smells like a dragon, and shouts like a dragon, dragging them down to the earth. It is the uncanny valley of the Dover. You are the mirror that shows them their own mortality. As the battle ends, the effect of the shout begins to wane. The golden scales flicker and dissolve into motes of light. The spectral helmet evaporates. The massive power that coursed through your veins recedes, leaving you feeling smaller, lighter, and perhaps a little colder. You're just a Nord, or an Imperial, or an Elf again. The dragon has gone back to sleep inside your chest, but you know it is there. You know that beneath the skin, beneath the ribs, there is a fire that cannot be extinguished. You are the Dovahkiin, and when the time is right, when the world is threatened, or when the shadows grow too long, you will let the dragon out again. The spectral armour fades, dissolving into the quiet dark of the cavern. The golden light of the dragon soul dims, retreating back beneath the surface of the skin, leaving only the steady, rhythmic beating of a mortal heart. The battle is over. The shouts have all been spoken. The echoes have finally ceased to bounce off the cold stone walls of our journey. We have walked a long path tonight, traveller. We started on the high peaks, whispering to the wind to make us ethereal, fading into the safety of the void. We have commanded the storms of Kine, frozen the blood of our enemies, and torn the very souls from their bodies. We have sprinted across chasms on the breath of a tempest, and stood toe-to-toe with the ancient heroes of Sovngarde. We have stripped warriors of their pride and dragons of their immortality, and now we stand in the silence. Take a moment to feel the weight of your armour, not the spectral light of the dragon, but the comforting heavy reality of the blanket pulled up to your chin. Let the tension drain from your shoulders, just as the magicka drains from a spent spell. You don't need to shout anymore, you don't need to fight. The bandits have been cleared, the loot has been gathered, and the quest log is empty for the night. The fire in the hearth at Breeze Home is crackling low, casting long, soft shadows against the wood. The music of the world has slowed to a gentle ambient hum, the sound of wind in the pines and water lapping at the shores of the Sea of Ghosts. It is a safe sound, a sound that promises rest. You have done enough. The world will still be there tomorrow with all its dragons and dungeons. But for now the sky is clear, the moons are watching, and the innkeeper has given you the best room. Close your eyes. Let the darkness take you, not as an enemy, but as an old friend. Sweet dreams.